Come all you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
The largest union talk radio program in the South. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. Folks, we've got a great show for you today. Lots of pre-taped interviews, lots of interviews coming up. If you'd like to leave us a voicemail or send us a text message, the phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. Don't think that we're going to be able to have time to take calls today, so you can leave us a voicemail or send us a text at that number. You can also send us a written message at TVLR.fm/contact. Yesterday was Juneteenth, right, Adam?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, yesterday was Juneteenth, and of course, June is also Pride Month, and so I just had some thoughts to share as we open today's episode. And I know on the surface those may seem like two different commemorations, but to me, they really point us toward the same fundamental truth, one that every trade unionist ought to understand. The labor movement has only ever been as strong as our ability to stand together. Because if you can convince working people to fear one another more than they fear their own exploitation, you've already won. That's the oldest trick in the boss's playbook. And nowhere has that strategy been used more effectively than right here in the South. Juneteenth, of course, commemorates June 19th, 1865, when the last enslaved people in Galveston, Texas, finally learned they were free, more than 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation. It's a celebration of liberation, but it's also a reminder that freedom delayed is freedom denied. Several labor unions recognized that this week. My own union, IATSE, reminded its members that emancipation wasn't simply the end of slavery. It marked the beginning of a new struggle. Newly freed people immediately faced another question. How do working people secure dignity, justice, and a fair day's pay for a fair day's work? Freedom alone wasn't enough. Workers needed power. Workers needed organization. Workers needed solidarity. That's where the labor movement enters the story. Reconstruction wasn't simply about rebuilding the South after the Civil War. It was about answering a question we're still wrestling with today. Can ordinary working people govern themselves instead of being ruled by concentrated wealth? For a brief moment, America came closer than ever before to building a truly multiracial democracy in the South. You know, poor black workers and poor white workers were voting together. Public education was actually created and expanded here in the South. New state governments invested in ordinary people instead of just wealthy landowners. Labor organizing began to grow. And, you know, it wasn't perfect, but it was the beginning of something pretty remarkable. And that's exactly why it was crushed. The planter class and their political allies understood something that still holds true today. If working people ever recognize their shared interest, the people at the top have a real problem. So they turned to terror, they turned to disenfranchisement, they turned to segregation, they turned neighbor against neighbor. Jim Crow wasn't just a racial system, it was also a labor system. It was designed in part to keep wages low, unions weak, and working people divided. And if we're honest with ourselves, you know, we've all been paying the price ever since for the failures of Reconstruction to be completed. The South didn't remain the poorest region of the country because ordinary Southerners wanted low wages, dangerous jobs, weak schools, or failing hospitals. The South stayed poor because division proved cheaper than justice. The wealthy discovered that if they could keep workers fighting one another, they wouldn't have to answer for the conditions they created. They've spent over 200 years telling Southern workers we have more to fear from each other than from the people signing our paychecks, the folks who own the economy. It's time we stop believing them. The strategy didn't just hurt black workers, it hurt white workers, it hurt immigrant workers, It hurt every worker who punches a clock for a living. And of course, that same model has spread far beyond the South. Sorry, getting a little choked up here today. Let me get some water. Sorry about that, y'all.
You're just so moved by solidarity.
Well, I am moved by solidarity and also needed some water, but yeah, I mean, honestly, this model has spread far beyond the South. We know that. It's not unique to the South. And I also think Pride Month does belong in this conversation because every generation, the targets of division can change and tactics can evolve. But the strategy of the oligarchy, of the ruling elites, it really doesn't evolve that much. Today, LGBT workers, they're told they don't belong. Immigrant workers are blamed for problems they didn't create. Black workers still face discrimination on and off the job. Politicians, they tell us to fear our neighbors instead of asking why working families can't afford housing, health care, or child care. But you know, solidarity has never required us to be identical. It requires us to recognize that our futures are connected.
Do you need,
so, yeah, go ahead and take over.
Yeah. I'll let Adam see if he can clear his throat a little bit, and I'll talk about something else that because he's got some really good remarks written on this, and so I want to let him get back to it. Something else that happened last week was the Faster Labor Contracts Act was passed in the U.S. House of Representatives. The U.S. House of Representatives passed the Faster Labor Contracts Act after Republicans and Democrats, a majority of them in the House, signed a discharge petition to go around House leadership to bring it to a vote in the first place. Right? If it was up to House Speaker Mike Johnson, it would not have gone to a vote at all. But thanks to a majority of members of the House, I think it was all Democrats and maybe 20 Republicans signed the petition to bring it to the floor. It was voted on and it passed. So that's really exciting. And the question then is, what is the Faster Labor Contracts Act? And it's basically just the mandatory first contract arbitration provision of the Protecting the Right to Organize Act. The Protecting the Right to Organize, the PRO Act, is something that has been introduced for the last several congressional sessions. And is a really all-around bill to improve the rights of workers to organize, to inhibit employers from union busting, and make it easier for workers to build unions. The Faster Labor Contracts Act is just the first contract arbitration provision of the PRO Act. So what it would do is, after workers have voted to form a union, employers must begin negotiating with the new union within 10 days. There is right now no firm deadline for the employer to begin negotiating with the union. The Faster Labor Contracts Act would establish that deadline at 10 days. If no agreement is reached after 90 days, the dispute will then be referred to mediation. If mediation fails after 30 days or additional periods agreed upon by both parties, the dispute will be referred to a binding 3-person arbitration panel to secure an initial contract. The Government Accountability Office will then commission a report on average workplace time to contract 1 year after enactment. So I think if it passes, it would be a really good piece of legislation. It would move the status quo from no contract after workers form their union. It would move the status quo from employers fighting tooth and nail to stop workers from getting a fair first contract to the status quo being workers are going to get some contract after they win their union. It's going to kind of depend on the industry, what it looks like, and the individual arbitrators, but they'll get something, and it will be an improvement over where they began. That would be a huge improvement. There are some critics who, the businesses obviously don't want it because they don't want the status quo to be moved in any way towards building worker power, towards making it easier for workers to organize, towards making it easier for workers to get better wages and working conditions. They don't want any of that. But there are also some on the sort of union militant side that are skeptical of this because they are, they're kind of hesitant to give the power to set contracts to government arbitrators, saying that kind of takes the democratic element out of unions. It takes the power away from rank and file to government arbitrators. And so they're kind of concerned about that dynamic. But like I said, what this bill would do is take the status quo from no contract, employer fighting tooth and nail, trying to decertify the union, to the status quo being workers are going to get a contract after they win their union. Additionally, there is not mandatory arbitration for the second contract, and the bill provides that the first contract be 2 years, right? So what would end up happening, in effect, if a first contract is imposed by arbitration, is that the workers would get 2 years to build their strength in the unit and prepare for the second contract negotiations in the context of being able to have a union, being able to have union meetings, build solidarity, collect dues, etc., etc. Instead of being, negotiating for the same time period, right? We're going to have a unit that I'm going to talk about in Last Week in Southern Labor that just ratified their first contract 3 years after they voted to unionize. If the Faster Labor Contracts Act would have been in place, they would have already had their first contract, and they'd be negotiating for their second contract, and they would have had the intervening period of being able to have acted like a union and have gotten some of the benefits of being members of a union, like just cause provisions, grievance provisions, et cetera, right? So, I mean, it would be, I think, objectively an improvement in the status quo to have the Faster Labor Contracts Act. Also, there's a really good article about it in On Labor, what critics of the Faster Labor Contracts Act get wrong. You should read it if you are the type to think that maybe it wouldn't be so good to move power from the rank and file, from the unions, to government arbitrators. Another thing that they talk about is that Canada basically already has this law, and only 1 or 2% of first contracts are ever actually imposed by yes, only 1% of 1 or 2% of contracts are imposed by contract arbitration in Canada. What actually happens is that instead of those contracts being imposed under that law, is it encourages the employer to negotiate because, both the employer and the employees have reason to try to keep it out of arbitration because the employer
neither wants to lose their input, right?
Exactly. Because it's true that the employers and the employees both have a better understanding of their workplace and what their needs and wants are than a government arbitrator. So it just pushes both sides to try to get to a deal that is agreeable. And if it doesn't, well, then, there will be binding arbitration. So, objectively, an improvement in the status quo. I think that people who are trying to kind of critique it from the left are really just, I don't know.
Could it be better? Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Is it as comprehensive as the PRO Act? No, but like you said, it's an improvement to the status quo. And if it could actually happen, which I know is definitely a separate question, like, can it really happen? It's hard to say, but it seems to have more traction than the PRO Act, at least under the current dynamic. which is promising.
Yes.
And, we've been critical of Sean O'Brien and his leadership in the Teamsters in terms of his political approach, but he's gone all in on this, and it would be an improvement because there are a lot of workers in this country right now who would have a contract if this is the law, and that would give them room to move forward, like you said, to organize. And I know that there have been neutrality, labor peace agreements in some areas where this has been part of the agreement, right? Not only did the company agree to be neutral during a campaign, they also agreed to binding arbitration within a set period after, any form of union victory. And so it's not totally unprecedented. Companies have agreed to these sorts of agreements before privately.
Right. Yeah. And that gets us to the question of the politics of this. I think that most people who have been following this legislation know that it has been spearheaded basically, almost single-handedly by the Teamsters president, Sean O'Brien. And the Teamsters president, Sean O'Brien, has really kind of dubious politics. And he's really trying to make a lot of hay out of the purported Republican realignment around labor. And I think that the truth of that realignment, the value of it, is really indicated by where the support for this Faster Labor Contracts Act is coming from. Because even as Sean O'Brien is really going out of his way to criticize Democrats, to compliment Republicans, and to not criticize Republicans, he's really going out of his way to do that. I mean, you look at the public statements that Sean O'Brien has made over the last 2 or 3 years, and it's frankly been shameful how how unevenly he is treating each side with respect to labor rights. I mean, it's just not, there's not a comparison as far as who supports unions more, Democrats or Republicans generally, and but if you only read or listened to Sean O'Brien, you would think it was exactly the opposite of what is actually the truth. So even with all of that, kind of filleting the Republican Party and Donald Trump in the House, every single Democrat supported it. And something like 20 or less Republicans supported it. 10% of the caucus. In the Senate, again, every Democrat and independent who caucuses with the Democrats supports it. And there are, I think, 3 or 4 Republican senators that support the Faster Labor Contracts Act. Not nearly enough to get it over the filibuster. And so, I think the breakdown of who is supporting this bill really puts to bed or puts the lie to the claim that there is a genuine Republican realignment around labor. Generally, Republicans want to see the labor movement crushed and want to see the power of employers and international corporations increased, which I think would be bad for the world. Here's another thing that they mentioned in the On Labor article that I want to talk about here, because some of the kind of left critique, as I said, was around bureaucratic intrusion, giving more power to government bureaucrats, et cetera, et cetera. They say, when it comes to that issue, the status quo is worse. I'm going to quote from the article here. Quote, instead of keeping employers and unions focused on bargaining, as the Faster Labor Contracts Act would do, the current rules force the parties to continually return to the National Labor Relations Board to quarrel not over substance, but over the meta question of whether their negotiations are proceeding in good faith. It is like arguing about arguing, an unproductive distraction. Once the board applies for an enforcement of a bargaining order, we might say that the parties start arguing about arguing about arguing. By leveraging the threat of arbitration, the Faster Labor Contracts Act nudges parties to bargain in good faith instead of bringing in a third party to directly micromanage the negotiating behavior. So It would be a good bill if it passes. I don't think it's going to pass because of the Senate, and honestly, I don't think Trump would sign it. I don't know. I guess if it passes the Senate and the House, which it would have to do over the filibuster, maybe Trump would sign it. Just because even if it's enacted exactly as is, ultimately, it really doesn't shift the balance of power that much. It would just be a good thing. And you know what they think about good things in the Trump administration. They're not very big fans. So there you go. Faster Labor Contracts Act passed the House of Representatives. We'll see what happens in the Senate.
Yeah, and it actually reminds me of the idea people have been floating around about going for shorter contracts initially anyway. So yeah, I mean, I think if worst case scenario, an arbitration, ends up in a crappy first contract, you still have a contract, and that's better than no contract. 90% of workers do not have a contract. They are better off having some kind of bare bones protection. And then, yeah, you can build from there. You can organize from there and have a real contract campaign and hopefully put enough pressure on the employer to settle a good contract the next time without arbitration. So, yeah, it's a good step, but it's not going to drastically change the organizing environment, I think, which is part of the issue. Yes, it's difficult to get a contract, and I think that's the majority experience for workers who organize new unions. But some of the trickiest parts of it is before you get to that stage, right? Like of actually building out an organizing committee, getting a union to a public stage, winning an election, if that's what you have to do, which in most cases you will, and withstanding the employer opposition throughout that whole phase, right? That's really the tough part of it, that so many workers never make it past that stage or even to that stage. So that doesn't really address that part of the dynamic, I think. So I could see it passing potentially because of, it's not as much of a threat, to the overall structure of it, but we'll see. Stranger things have happened, I guess. And also, who knows, maybe some of the Republicans will be seeking some popularity, and unions are pretty popular. We are overwhelmingly popular with the American public. So I could imagine maybe they try to throw us a bone or two, especially in advance of the midterms in November, which are not looking great for them.
Right.
But yeah, I guess I can pick up where I was talking earlier, and sorry to get a little discombobulated, but, really what was on my mind is that politicians are constantly telling us to fear our neighbors instead of asking why working families are struggling so hard, right? We're struggling to afford housing, healthcare, childcare. Meanwhile, these corporations are posting record profits. I'm thinking about that fella, Jay Mitchell, that we talked about on the show a couple weeks ago. Just a really hateful, disgraceful ad. He did lose, by the way. But, that's just, it's really shameful because it doesn't even touch on the lived experiences that we are going through day after day to just survive. And, like I was saying, solidarity has never really required us to be identical. We don't all have to think alike or talk alike or really believe all the same things necessarily. But it does require us to recognize that our futures are connected. Several unions did emphasize that during their Pride Month statements. IFPTE just kept it simple. Our diversity is our strength. The UFCW reminded us that LGBT rights are workers' rights. And CWA highlighted Pride as an opportunity to build stronger, more inclusive unions because every worker deserves dignity, respect, and a voice on the job. That is not a distraction from the labor movement. And I know some folks think that way, right? Don't talk about social justice issues. Don't talk about race. Don't talk about gender. That's a distraction. But to me, that's what the labor movement has always supposed to do, right? Like we're always supposed to be standing with the least of these, standing with the most vulnerable, not necessarily because it's fashionable or politically convenient, because that's how solidarity works. That's why we do it. An injury to one is an injury to all is not just a slogan. It is actually our strategy to win. And it's the only strategy that ever really has, especially here in the South. You know, we face some enormous challenges. Union density's too low. Politicians keep attacking us. Corporations, they get billions in subsidies while our wages lag behind. Working families are struggling. Healthcare, housing, our services are underfunded. Public education's under attack. Inequality's growing. You know, there's multiple layers of crisis, but none of them get solved by dividing the working class into smaller and smaller camps. So I think that this moment really demands the broadest, strongest, most diverse coalition of working people that this region has ever seen. A labor movement that looks like the working class. That's what we need. That's what it's going to take to save this country. So, yeah, that's what's on my mind. Happy Juneteenth. Happy Pride Month.
844-899-TVLR is the phone number. You can send us a text message or leave us a voicemail. Right now, we'll be keeping an eye on the text messages. 844-899-8857.
And let us know if you were at LaborNotes.
Yeah.
We ran into a lot of y'all at LaborNotes, and it was great to see so many familiar faces and new faces. Lots of old friends and regular listeners. So if you were there in Chicago, leave us a voicemail. Let us know about your experience. And if you didn't make it, but you would like to go, let us know, you know, what you're interested in, what you would like to learn. It was great to connect with so many people and just see the future of our movement.
Yeah, I did see that LaborNotes is apparently going to be getting a bigger venue for the next one. So there were 4,700 attendees this time, and so hopefully it's a bunch more next time. I'm looking forward to 2028. Union Gus says, happy Saturday. It was great meeting Whitney, Adam, and Jacob last week at LaborNotes. Randy says, good morning, comrades. Union Gus says, W.E.B. Du Bois calls the self-emancipation of slaves in the South the largest strike in U.S. history. Benjo says, good morning, all. Big Bang says, absolutely disgusting things happening in corporate America. Workers unite. And then Union Gus talks about short contracts. Tony Gilpin's The Long Deep Grudge talks about the farm implement workers who organized one-year contracts and enforced it by a strike. Stussy says, I would have loved to have met Kim Kelly and Hamilton Nolan. They were both there. It was great getting to see them. They're always at LaborNotes, I think, usually. And so, yeah.
Two of the best writers out there on the labor movement, for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was a lot of fun getting to see them and hang out with them at the In These Times after party.
Yeah, because there was a live taping of Working People podcast, which if you're not into, definitely check it out. Max Alvarez with Real News Network partners with In These Times magazine. It's called Working People Podcast. Definitely check it out. Alex Press, Hamilton Nolan, Kim Kelly recorded an interview with Max Alvarez.
Yeah.
So check that one out. Especially if you miss LaborNotes, you get a little taste of it.
After the break, we're going to be playing our interview with Shawn Fain from the AFL-CIO convention, and ATU President Costa. We'll also be talking, as always, about last week in Southern Labor and Boss Watch. And then in the second half of the program, we're going to be talking to a Minneapolis union leader about the federal indictments. And we're going to be playing some picket line interviews that I did in Chicago. And we'll be talking to Alex Press, Jacobin labor reporter, about the LaborNotes conference. So make sure you stay tuned, folks. You're listening to the Valley Labor Report. Again, the phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. And if you would like to help us stay on the air, you can donate at tvlr.fm/donate. We'll be right back.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for the Valley Labor Report comes from the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers Union. Learn more by visiting www.ifpte.org.
Are you looking for a better future, a career that can have you set for life, and to be a part of something that's bigger than yourself? If you are, then consider a skilled trades apprenticeship with the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. The work of IUPAT is all around us, from the industrial painters who work on the bridges to drywall finishers, floor coverers, the glazers who install the glass in our skylines, and so much more. With an IUPAT apprenticeship, you earn while you learn and receive benefits while learning the trade, including a pension. We provide world-class education free of charge. That's right, no student debt. Our starting salaries for apprentices that graduate is above the national median salary with benefits for entire families. And you have the flexibility to take your trade wherever you'd like in the country to work. IUPAT District Council 77 covers our entire region, so give Adam Booth a call at 205-603-3142 for more information. Again, that phone number is 205-603-3142. Come build a better future with us today and join IUPAT.
We're the nurses, firefighters, and claims representatives that help keep our government services running. We respond to natural disasters. We care for our nation's veterans, and we investigate discrimination in the workplace. We are federal and D.C. government workers, and we are proud to serve the American people. Working in more than 70 agencies across the government, we know we can fulfill our mission because our union has our back. Learn more at AFGE.org. Paid for by the American Federation of Government Employees, AFL-CIO.
Since 1889, the National Association of Letter Carriers has protected the rights of city carriers as they deliver the mail and offer support for their community. The Alabama State Association of Letter Carriers makes their legislative voices heard when it comes to issues involving the U.S. Postal Service and the working members of the union. The National Association of Letter Carriers has been longtime supporters of the Muscular Dystrophy Association and the Stamp Out Hunger Food Drive. This message is sponsored by the Alabama Association of Letter Carriers. To learn more, visit NALC.org. Unite Here is also a supporter of the Valley Labor Report. They are a labor union that represents 300,000 working people across Canada and the United States. Their members work in the hotel, gaming, food service, manufacturing, textile, distribution, laundry, transportation, and airport industries. You can learn more about Unite Here at unitehere.org.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
A battle in the heart of Alabama caught our attention. Coal miners in one community, they've been on strike now for months.
Working as long as 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, in some of the most dangerous conditions.
I really think that the labor movement is the single greatest force for democracy in the history of the United States.
The story of Alabama is a story of not just resilience, but of militancy.
I say no contract, you say no code. No contract, no contract.
If we ain't all free, ain't none of us free.
You're listening to Alabama's only union talk radio show, The Valley Labor Report, with Adam Keller and Jacob Morrison.
That's right, folks. From the mountains of Tennessee to the bayous of Louisiana, broadcasting online and on the radio from the heart of the Tennessee Valley, the Spice Radio Studios in Huntsville, Alabama. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. Today on the program, we just talked about the Faster Labor Contracts Act and the importance of solidarity with respect to Juneteenth and Pride Month. We're about to play a conversation that we had with Shawn Fain and ATU President Costa at the AFL-CIO convention and more. If you'd like to leave us a voicemail or send us a text message, you can do that at 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. You can also send us a written note at tvlr.fm/contact. If you haven't gotten enough of us by the time that we wrap up here on the radio, or if you just want to see what we're up to throughout the week, you can find us anywhere you find anything online, in particular at our website, tvlr.fm, but we are also on YouTube, Facebook, and wherever you get your podcasts, all at The Valley Labor Report. Just a reminder, your support helps us stay on the air. Our largest single source of funding comes directly from our listeners, so if you want to become a sustaining donor to the program or make a one-time donation, you can go to tvlr.fm/donate or patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report. We've got a bunch of cool merch for sale at tvlr.fm/store, and finally, if you're a member of a union, then you should get your local, your district council, your region, or international to sponsor the show. You can reach out to us for more details on that.
Hey, good morning, y'all. Let me add a disclaimer that any viewpoints or opinions expressed in this program belong solely to their author and do not necessarily represent any organization or sponsor. And we want to welcome all of our listeners, whether you're on YouTube, Facebook, WVNN, WZZA, WHIV, WGOW, WMSP, WCPT, KTNF, Means TV, or through your favorite podcast app. We are proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network and encourage our listeners to check that out at laborradionetwork.org. And as most of you know, we are not media professionals, just a few diehard unionists who want to amplify the voices of the working class, especially here in the American South. We're hoping this project can make a difference on that front, and we can't do it without you. So we want to thank everyone for tuning in. Whether you're a loyal fan or first-time listener, we appreciate you spending some time with us.
Landon in the chat said, thanks for the work you guys do here from Ford UAW Local 862 in Kentucky. Thankful for my union insurance after being diagnosed with stage 4 colorectal cancer. I don't know what I would do without it. I subscribed when you were covering Ford union negotiations with Shawn Fain. Thanks for subscribing, and thanks for that story. I really
and
appreciate
sending you
it. It's
all the
always
best.
good to hear stuff like that, and yeah, all the best. Absolutely. Let's get to last week in Southern labor. Every week in the South, workers organize new unions. They bargain for new contracts. They fight for good legislation and against bad legislation, and they put the boss in their place. These are some of the stories that we could find from June 5th to June 19th. This is Last Week in Southern Labor. Over the last 2 weeks, 429 workers in 17 bargaining units have gone public with their union campaigns. 24 workers in 2 bargaining units are trying to decertify their union. 556 workers across 4 bargaining units withdrew their petition for a union election. 682 workers across 8 bargaining units unionized, and 468 workers across 9 bargaining units voted against unionization. Here are the details. In new union campaigns, 30 workers at Vibe Cannabis in St. Louis, Missouri, filed a petition to hold a union election with the United Food and Commercial Workers, UFCW Local 655. The employer filed a petition to hold a union election after a majority of the 48 workers at Georgia Power Company in Atlanta, Georgia, demonstrated support for unionization with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, IBEW Local 84. 12 workers at Starbucks in Little Rock, Arkansas, filed a petition to hold a union election with Starbucks Workers United, as did 19 workers at another location in Little Rock, Arkansas, and 1 worker at a location in Bowling Green, Kentucky. 20 workers at Jacobus Energy in Peachtree Corners, Georgia, filed a petition to hold a union election with the Teamsters Local 728, and workers likely pushed by their employer filed a petition to decertify UFCW Local 1996 as the union representing 13 workers at Kaiser Permanente in Duluth, Georgia. In election results, 18 workers at Fairbanks Morse in Houston, Texas voted 7-9 against unionization with the International Brotherhood of Boilermakers, IBB. 400 workers at Corning Optical Communications in Winston-Salem, North Carolina withdrew their petition for a union election with the United Steelworkers, USW. 343 workers at Schnellick Logistics in Chattanooga, Tennessee voted 187 to 91 in favor of unionization with the United Auto Workers, UAW. 10 workers at American Electric Power in Hurricane, West Virginia voted 10-0 in favor of unionization with IBEW Local 978. 221 workers at HR Bristol in Bristol, Virginia voted 108 to 65 in favor of unionization with the Teamsters Local 519. 49 workers at Central Alabama Electric Cooperative in Prattville, Alabama voted 23 to 17 in favor of unionization with the IBEW Local 443. In strikes and bargaining updates, Jackson, Mississippi bus drivers voted to go on strike. That's what their union, the Amalgamated Transit Union, ATU, Local 1208, told Mississippi Today. This comes after the membership unanimously rejected the company's latest offer. The company, MV Transportation, is contracted to run JTran, the city's transit system. The two sides have been negotiating since early 2024, and WAPT reports that drivers are seeking a raise from $23 an hour to $26 an hour in the first year. Meanwhile, the company is seeking to cut costs by reducing routes and ending Saturday service on top of not accepting the pay increase. The Jackson mayor has gotten involved and hopes to resolve the dispute before mid-July when the strike would begin, but he hasn't said publicly which side he is on or closer to. Jackson, Mississippi is facing a deficit, and the company claims they are losing money. Workers at Rainbow Blossom Natural Food Markets, a grocery store in Louisville, Kentucky, just voted to ratify their first collective bargaining agreement after nearly 3 years of negotiations after they voted to unionize with UFCW Local 227. The union says that the contract contains provision for just cause disciplinary actions, a meaningful arbitration process, yearly salary increases, holiday pay, and job security assurances. UFCW Local 227 President Bob Blair said in a statement that this is an important win for Kentucky natural foods workers, and we can't wait to see our siblings at our other 5 locations join us. We look forward to reporting on it when they do. In political and legislative updates, Social Security workers are raising the alarm about the state of the agency. American Federation of Government Employees, AFGE Council 220 President Jessica LaPointe said in a statement to Congress that the agency is at a 59-year staffing low. She said that, quote, record backlogs, field office closures, reassignments, and deteriorating service are the direct result of that chronic underfunding and accelerated workforce reductions. She called on Congress to pass legislation introduced by Representative John Larson of Connecticut that would safeguard the Social Security Administration for current and future generations, titled Social Security 2100. In internal union affairs, it's been a big few weeks for union conventions. The AFL-CIO had its quadrennial convention and re-elected without opposition Liz Shuler and Fred Redmond as president and secretary-treasurer. Shuler set a goal to organize 2 million workers in the next 5 years and said that they met the last convention's goal of 1 million workers in 10 years already. For the record, we don't think that's true, actually, and we're not sure where they are getting that number from. They also passed a resolution to honor the Pope. They called for single payer, and they supported immigrant rights. The next week, nearly 5,000 union militants from across the country and the globe met at the biannual LaborNotes convention to strategize about how to put the movement back in the labor movement. And then, the UAW and the Teamsters both had their constitutional conventions. The Teamsters re-elected Sean O'Brien and Fred Zuckerman without a direct election for the first time in decades because no opposition candidates were able to garner enough support to get on the ballot. Delegates also passed resolutions to organize more workers and fight UPS. At the UAW convention, delegates voted to divest from Israel, to increase their strike fund, and to invest more money in organizing. Shawn Fain and his slate of candidates will face opposition in a direct election later this year. The threshold to get on the ballot is lower in the UAW than in the Teamsters. If we missed something, let us know and subscribe to our newsletter to get the exhaustive version of Last Week in Southern Labor right in your inbox every single week. You can do that at tvlr.fm. The Huntsman says, good morning. The union news is not so great, but DSA swept DC primaries. I did see that. The Democratic nominee for mayor of DC is a DSA member, and there are so few Republicans in DC that there's no Republican on the ballot, and so the opposition to the DSA candidate for mayor is a Green Party candidate for mayor. So pretty interesting.
A little different vibe than we're getting down here.
I wonder who are the Republicans going to support? Are they going to support the DSA or the Green Party?
Yeah, that'll be fascinating to find out. Some good exit polling.
Yeah, that would be interesting. Okay. We've been teasing it. Shawn Fain interview at the AFL-CIO convention. Let's go ahead and play that. We're here with Shawn Fain, International President of the UAW. Shawn Fain, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. I appreciate it.
Yeah, great to be here.
You've mentioned in your speeches a lot that you've got a connection to the South, being a radio program that now airs, in Minneapolis and Chicago, but we come from the South. That is pretty important and interesting to us. Can you talk a little bit about that connection?
Oh, you bet. I mean, all of my grandparents were from the South. I mean, my grandma Fain actually was born in Greenville, Tennessee. My grandpa Carter was born in Habersham, Tennessee, which was a coal mining area in the northeastern part of Tennessee. Grandpa Fain was born in Nicholasville, Kentucky, and my other grandma has her roots are in Tennessee. So really, and all I heard I was blessed to grow up with them, grow up around them. And so all I heard my whole life growing up was stories about the Great Depression and what they went through, and they had nothing. And I mean, the one thing I was blessed to have is grandparents that taught me, no matter where you go in life, don't ever forget you come from poverty. So all those stories of what they went through. I mean, they migrated north in the 30s and 40s, and they were able to get jobs at General Motors and Chrysler, and they lived the American dream. I mean, it was a time when the UAW organized those places, and I mean, they talked about their lives from one extreme to the other, and they were able to have a good retirement, and live a decent quality, live the American dream, and which has been dead for decades in this country. So
a big campaign of the UAW has been to organize auto workers in the South, and y'all just won another victory last week in Chattanooga at a VW parts manufacturer, right?
Yes, at Schnelke, and again, it just goes to show when workers see that it can be done, that workers can organize in the South, and that it's not going to be the end of the world, that you can get investment. We got a great agreement. The bargaining committee down there at Volkswagen and our team, we got a great agreement there. I mean, really raise a standard for the workers there, and got some job security, some future product commitment. And so I think that helps other workers see that and see that it is possible and that they can win and they can do better. And so just around over 300 workers at Schnelke voted by 2-1 to join the UAW a week ago, and so that's huge. And look, you look at the Mercedes situation in Alabama. I mean, it's another one that we were narrowly 300 votes the other way we would have won, and you think about that. I mean, Mercedes broke the law. They ran a vicious campaign. Same story everywhere in America anymore with organizing, and but even given that, I mean, we were within 300 votes of winning that, and so I really believe what happened at Volkswagen could be the impetus for building on that. So I think there's better things to come all over.
As the UAW's been organizing in the South for the last few years with with, I think anybody would say increased aggression and increased interest in trying to make it happen. A couple of big wins, one loss at Mercedes. Is there anything that you feel like you and the UAW have learned from organizing in the South?
I mean, look, I mean, it's where my roots are. I mean, I've been down in the South a lot in my life. I mean, I know the mantra that's sometimes is embedded in people growing up down there. My family members, some of my own family members. I mean, but at the end of the day, there is no difference. We've learned a lot of lessons. I mean, obviously, just we're always reflecting. Every drive we do, we sit down, we reflect what worked, what didn't work, and we're always improvising, changing, and just always trying to refine the process. Organizing in some areas is different than other areas. So you really got to know the people. You got to really know, what moves them, and just and know that history. So I think it's just respecting, cultures, respecting heritage, and just really speaking truth to people. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you're from Alabama or Michigan or Mexico or pick a country, Canada. I mean, it's all the same issue for working class people. I mean, corporate greeds ran away. They've taken all the profits. They've left working class people behind, and we're all struggling to live. And so unions are the key to helping you live a better life.
One of the things that people say that makes organizing in the South difficult is how entrenched, like, a social conservative politics is in the South, or at least that's kind of the narrative. And you mentioned something that, you mentioned that, workers in Mexico have very similar problems to workers in the U.S. South and workers in Michigan and Minnesota. So I guess how do you think that? How do politics and the particularly the really intense kind of partisan polarization affect your campaigns, and how do you try to bridge that gap and still be trusted by your members to fight for them while not being afraid to advocate for the rights of immigrants or LGBT people? And how do you walk that line?
Well, I mean, to me, it's not even a line to walk. I mean, it's to me, it's very simple. I go back to basics in this. You talk about social conservatives. Look, unfortunately, in this country, we have allowed a political party to hijack religion, as if you don't vote for, they want you to believe if you don't vote for them, that you're somehow anti-Christian. I don't care what religion you are. I'm a Christian. I read my Bible. Every day I get up, I do a daily reading, I pray, but I know this: the Bible I read, it doesn't talk about shutting out the immigrant. It doesn't talk about color of skin and don't welcome these people, or it talks about love of your fellow human being. So all the things that party that claims to stand for for religion, it's hijacked religion. You look at what they stand for. I mean, eliminating diversity, equity, inclusion programs. That treat people equally. Blaming immigrants as if they're the problem. Immigrants aren't the problem. No one's taken our jobs. The only people taking our jobs are the corporate class and the rich, who keep taking the profits and shipping jobs where they can exploit people for less labor and less wages somewhere else. And so, they want to blame, people who they love or what bathroom they use. I say this all the time to our members. I don't know how it is in your house, but in my house, I don't give a damn what color you are, who you love, what you do. We all use the same damn toilet. And why is it any different? It's not. That's just, those are all issues to divide us, and it's all by design. They want to divide us, and they want to divide us over those things, so we're not focused on what's really happening to us. We have the greatest wealth and equality in the history of our nation. The richest 1% have more than the bottom 95% of people. There's no excuse for that. It's criminal. But it's happened because they divide us, because we're pointing fingers at each other over all these things that really aren't issues. And while we're doing that, they're eating our lunch. So I believe we have to speak truth to that. Every time I speak to our members about, I don't know, what your religious beliefs are. I don't care what your beliefs are, but I respect that. But at the end of the day, the Democratic Party's done a horrible job at speaking about religion, and they've been almost afraid of it. Republicans have hijacked it, and at the end of the day, when you hear one message from one party, that's what's really hijacked our politics in that area. So I just think we have to speak truth to it, because the Bible I read and every religion I know of on the planet speaks of love of your fellow human being. That's the foundation of it. It's not hating people. It's not closing doors. It's not welcoming people. It's not, what color you are. It's love of your fellow human being. That means black, white, sex, whatever it is. I mean, it doesn't matter. And so that's how we have to look at this, and that's how I talk to our members about this and anyone else I speak to about it.
In the response to that question, you talked about the huge amount of wealth inequality and the exploitation of working people by corporations and bosses, and that's really, I think, the why it's important to build a strong labor movement. I don't know if there's anything else that you would say about why it's important to build a strong labor movement, and feel free to do so if there is more that you would want to add to that. But how do we do that? What are some things that you think that people from the rank and file who are listening to this to maybe other union leaders, what can people start doing to try to get us more firmly on that path to building a strong labor movement?
Well, I just think we have to become organized. We have to organize ourselves, and throw party politics out of this when it comes to elections. I mean, we need to elect candidates that look like us, that come from our ranks. We don't need millionaires and billionaires and corporate people elected to state levels, to local levels, to national politics. We need to elect working class people, number one, people that look like us, people that understand, what it's like to live paycheck to paycheck. How many people in Congress do you think live paycheck to paycheck, or even know what the hell it's like? Maybe a handful even understand that concept. We've got to elect people that know that life, that know what that is, and so, I say this all the time, like, they have the money, but we have the people. But we've got to unite people to come together and focus on the things that really matter. No matter what job you do, like we've let the corporate class and the rich, like, rank work, like, oh, you work at fast food, that's a summer job, or they want to demean certain types of work as if it don't matter. I don't give a damn what type of work somebody does. They deserve a living wage, and we can afford those things. Companies can. You tell me McDonald's can't afford to pay people more money? We saw that in the pandemic. You saw what happened. They were paying $12 an hour. Workers in the fast food industry stayed home. All of a sudden, they could afford to pay them $20, $25 an hour. That wasn't magic. That just tells you how much they're screwing these workers. And it's the same everywhere. We've got to put people first. And so I think we've got to come together as working class people in this country, union or not. We've got to get active politically. We've got to elect people that understand the struggle. And when it comes to organizing, I mean, we've got to organize workplaces. We got to speak truth to that. I mean, unfortunately, a lot of laws in this country are not tailored to help workers. Companies violate the law, break the law all the time. There's no repercussions. We break the damn law and we go to jail. We pay a price. I mean, this whole system is rigged, and it's rigged so that the 1% and the richest among us can do whatever the hell they want while we all struggle. And so we've really just got to come together and look at what unites us, which is everything. It's love of our fellow human beings, and not focus on the divide and conquer tactics. And keep building that. We can show up at rallies. Look at what happened with ICE right here in Minneapolis. I mean, killing people in the damn streets. That is not what the hell we are as a nation. But you saw hundreds of thousands of people come here and rally and stand in freezing cold weather to say we're not going to tolerate this. And those are things that give me hope. I mean, is seeing people are fed up. They're fed up with being left behind. So we've got to continue to build on that. I don't have all the answers. I wish I did, but we get the answers from among all of us when we come together. That's how we get answers, by having these conversations.
I've got two more questions, and we're coming up on your time. So the second to last one is about the role of labor and labor friendly media. Like, how, if you had an audience with radio programs like ours and publications that do this kind of reporting, how is there any advice that you would give to people like me and people who do things like I do to be more effective, or to reach people and to help convince people of the value and why people should be unions and help grow the labor movement?
I mean, I just say, like, 3 years ago, nobody knew who the hell I was. And it just, I think, was, we tried to do things different. We tried to be vocal about our issues, which in the past our union was blackout bargaining. We don't talk about it, and so that's something I always hated. we talked about our issues, and I believe, and we talked on every means necessary we could find, every social media means. I mean, news media, whatever we could get into, we've tried to get into to be vocal about the reality of what people are living, and that spoke to people everywhere. So, I'm proud of that work, but like, to me, it's labor's obligation. We have to lead this fight for working people. If you don't have a union, you're an employee at will. And that's the reality a lot of people face every day is, they if they're vocal in the workplace, the boss can throw them out in the damn street the next day. And so that is why it's so important to organize. And it's why it's so important to have a union. So I just believe, it's going to take all of us, like exactly what you're doing. We have to amplify the message. Trust me, I have a team of people around me that are a lot more savvy at that. So they're the ones that get the messaging out and do all that. I mean, I have the conversations, but it's not just me, it's all of us. The biggest power that we had, like in our stand-up strike and every fight we've had since, it's not me on a microphone, it's not me on the media, it's workers telling their stories. That's where the power is, because when our workers were out there in the media talking about the reality they're living, the working 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, or working 2 jobs and scraping to get by, that is what speaks to people, because everyone's living that reality in this country. And so to me, there's such power in all that. We've got to amplify these stories and just keep pounding it home. And unfortunately, again, the rich are buying up the media, they're owning everything, and it's not an accident, it's all by design. So we've got to find ways to counter that. I don't know all the answers, but I'm willing to work with anybody to figure it out and keep building on it.
What is your message to the tens of thousands of non-union auto workers, particularly in the South, including 50,000 in the state of Alabama?
No, I mean, you can do it, and you deserve better. I mean, it's sad, and I know what they're living. I know the reality they're living. I've been there. I struggled when I first went into the workforce, and joining a union changed my life. That's why I'm sitting here today, and it's benefited not just me, my family. I look at my grandparents. My grandparents were from the South. They moved north to get good jobs, where they could have a decent life and have a good retirement. Why the hell do you have to leave where you are to be able to do that? Why because you're in Alabama, do you have to make substandard wages and benefits? And that's what these companies do. They'll pay just enough to try to keep you from organizing. And then there's a threat of organizing. Look at the UAW bump when we were in the Big Three fight. After we won that massive contract, the first thing all these non-union companies did was they gave them a 10% pay increase, bigger increase than they've had in their lifetimes. Why'd they do that? Because they're scared shitless these workers are going to stand up and fight for themselves and claim what they deserve, because these companies are making massive profits at their expense. And so, to me, don't be afraid to stand up. People are with you. People will have your back 100% of the way, and you can do it. I mean, and you deserve it.
Shawn Fain, thank you for talking to us.
Oh, thank you. No, the pleasure's mine.
We're going to go to a break. We'll be right back. The Laborers International Union of North America, LIUNA, Local 366, is proudly recruiting North Alabama local workers to work construction and nuclear plant maintenance. If you're interested, please contact April at our training center to start the process at 256-904-1753. No experience is needed. We offer free training, but you must be able to pass a background check and a drug test. Local hiring that grows our community with good-paying jobs that have benefits is our mission. Live better, work union, Local 366, feel the power. The Valley Labor Report is also supported by the Communication Workers of America. Learn more at cwa-union.org.
Support for this program is provided by the International Association for Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local Lodge 44 in Decatur, Alabama. Learn more at iamaw44.org.
The Valley Labor Report is also sponsored by the United Automobile, Aerospace, and Agricultural Implement Workers of America, better known as the UAW. UAW. They are one of the largest and most diverse unions in North America, with members in virtually every sector of the economy. UAW-represented workplaces range from multinational corporations, small manufacturers, and state and local governments, to colleges and universities, hospitals, and private nonprofit organizations. The UAW has more than 400,000 active members and more than 580,000 retired members in the United States, Canada, and Puerto Rico. You can learn more about the UAW and join at uaw.org. The Valley Labor Report is also sponsored by LaborNotes. LaborNotes is a media and organizing project that has been the voice of union activists who want to put the movement back in the labor movement since 1979. You can learn more about LaborNotes at labornotes.org.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for this program also comes from the Mid-South Council of Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union. Learn more at rwdsu.info.
Union leaders, do you want a powerful website and mobile app built just for your members? The Union Active system, created by Unions America, makes it easy to share news and documents, send alerts, and keep your members engaged anytime, anywhere. Trusted by thousands of unions, Union Active streamlines communication so you can focus on what matters most, your members. With real-time updates, secure messaging, and custom features built for unions, you'll keep your members informed and engaged 24/7. Get Union Active today. Visit unionactive.com to learn more. Union Active, the ultimate website and communication system for unions.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Labor creates all wealth. All wealth should go to labor, and you are listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. Appreciate everybody tuning in. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR if you'd like to leave a voicemail or send us a text message. That is 844-899-8857. Appreciate everybody tuning in. We got another pre-taped interview, this one with ATU President John Costa, also from the AFL-CIO convention.
We have some good leadership there, serious leadership. We're getting more focus on our legislative conference boards in each state. The leadership has stepped up, and we're pushing for better legislation. We're doing more training. I believe, motivating your members. I believe in open bargaining for members. And I believe on our conferences, if we're going to utilize and have these meetings, to do some education in those meetings. And a lot of it is around not only the normal grievance procedures, but legislation and fighting back. I always tell my members, if you don't like politics, you're in the wrong business, because a lot of in our industry, in our transportation industry, the funding, we need funding, and that all comes, it's all politically connected. So we are growing. Our membership is growing in the South. We had a Baton Rouge, as you said, we had a strike, a successful strike. I happened to fly out there, met with the local, met with the representatives, the mayor, and actually he did help us settle that strike. We have a lot of private contractors that come in and want to operate a lot of the work down south, and it's and unfortunately, I don't believe that transportation is a profit making business. It's a necessity for the economy and for people. It's public transit for people that need it, and poor people's feet matter, right? So I think a lot of our members are motivated and fighting back. So that strike was pretty interesting. They were motivated. They held the line. I think that one was maybe my 11th or 12th strike since I've been in IP since 2019. And now I think I'm up to 15 or 16, and we have not lost one of them yet. But if you want to focus on the South, we're growing. We're doing a lot of work in the South. We're focused. Dallas, we're getting ready to do a strike possibly next week on a Transdev property, a light rail operation that's going on. They're threatening to do a strike there, and they're not bargaining in good faith. It's a newly organized property, and we gave them strike sanctions. So they rushed back to the table, trying to avoid it because also they have the games are going to be in Dallas. But the membership is willing to strike.
Yeah. We're joined now by International President of the Amalgamated Transit Union, John Costa, and we've been talking about some of the Southern activity that the ATU has been participating in. And you mentioned in what you were saying there, you mentioned that you don't believe that public transportation should be a for-profit sort of enterprise. You think that it should be seen more as a public service. And you mentioned that there's so many transit systems across the South and probably, really across the country, have been privatized, are being privatized, and they're not being thought of as public services. How does it affect your members when transit is seen more as something to extract profit for these big companies rather than something to provide transportation to the citizens of an area and that your members provide?
Well, the first thing the private contractors do is they want to cut your benefits, they want to cut your pay, and they want to make profits off, slave labor. Where, as you can see in the public sector, that money can be utilized, that extra money can be utilized to offset and give more to the worker to be able to live in the cities and be able to have a fair wage and a living standard. And we see in the private sector, that's not the same as the public sector. Safety-wise is another problem. Their equipment, they tend not to, invest into the equipment as we would in when it's public, because.
Well, on that one, I was reading some testimony from some of your members, and I think this was in San Antonio or Houston. The president of the local union was talking about how when he started back in the 80s, you had to have. It was at least several months of training. It could have been a couple of years. And now, I think it's less than a week. It's maybe 2 weeks of training in a huge metropolitan city with lots of construction. And, that seems like a little bit scary to think of for the workers and also for the people riding those the transit.
Yeah. It is. They tend to, shy away from good equipment, safe equipment. We find our maintenance people are behind on parts. The safety factor of even not the operation of the equipment, but also the protection of the equipment. And a lot of them don't have barriers for our operators that are constantly being abused and assaulted, and if not, killed. So. I find that in the private sector, because they're looking for a profit margin for their corporations, boards, it hurts. It hurts not only our members, but it hurts the community and the riders. Service isn't the same. They cut service. They don't get service out, and then the careers. A lot of the members don't. They don't. These were career jobs. I started in the industry, and years I've been working. They're pension jobs. If they're not defined pensions, they got 401ks that we negotiate to do mandatory contributions, whether or not a member puts in any money or not. They still have something, at least at the end of the day. But that's all seems to be going away when it comes to the difference between a public sector operation and a private.
You mentioned that y'all are organizing in the South, and you're striking in the South, and you're winning in the South. And, people see the South as a very anti-union region, but y'all have seen a decent bit of success. And, you just organized a unit in Dallas, you said. How are y'all able to do that in a region like the South?
I don't believe you run a union from your office. You got to get out there and talk to the members. My staff and is pretty good. My organizing department, my campaigns departments. I believe you get out there with the members, and if you're doing negotiations, open bargaining is a very, very good point of actually exposing the company instead of doing blackout bargaining. Of actually tell your employees, my members, what they're worth.
Right.
And when they see that, I think they realize, wow, they get totally insulted, and it's easier to motivate them to take up fine line on getting a strong and fair contract. So by doing that, I think we're educating our members more. The South is growing, let's face it. I mean, Tennessee, Florida, South Carolina, and Texas is going to be it's going to be very important for politics, especially when it comes to presidential elections. I believe in the next, if not the next one, definitely the one after that. Big players, so union density is growing there. A lot of people are moving there, so I think that helps too.
One of the places that we're on the radio is Chattanooga, and they're in the middle of, if I'm remembering right, they're in the middle of contract negotiations. The ATU there is with CARTA, the Chattanooga Area Regional Transit Authority. So have you been following those negotiations closely, or is there anything that you could say about the negotiations with CARTA?
Negotiations, unfortunately the local is under trusteeship, which we just took over, so I'm very aware of what's going on there because I run it now.
Okay.
It's my local. So we have some concerns with the pension issue. Going in there, we think we're wanting to tighten up on their defined benefit pension. We think the way they're handling that could be a little more help. Management's working with us. There is negotiations, and we want to build that membership there too because of the situation with the leadership before us. So we got some challenges there, but we also had some organizing there. School bus property. We organized a couple 100 school bus operators and trying to get a contract there. Tennessee's, is hard. It's not a friendly right to work and not a friendly union state, but we've been in Chattanooga for a long time and we plan on staying. And I have a team in there actually doing some membership building, some training, and actually signing more people up.
That's fantastic. As we're wrapping up here, we're here at the AFL-CIO convention. One of the big headlines is that Liz Shuler announced the goal of organizing at minimum 2 million more workers in the next 5 years. How do the affiliated unions of the AFL-CIO do that?
Well, when we talked about it in Philadelphia 4 years ago, and I was there, it seemed like, how do we do that? But we kind of did it. I mean, in the last 3 years, our union alone has organized over 5,000 members, and I'm still growing. More and more are coming in. So I think workers know now and believe that it's better to be in a union than not. And more of them are coming. My phone is ringing, and so how do we do it? It's really not that hard because I think the corporations and companies are forcing our phones to ring. Even in the transit business, they're calling. Even outside of transit, my industry, I try to keep our organizing involved around transit. I don't really go but I'm getting phone calls from factory workers, dock workers, looking for unions, which then of course I try to steer them to the union that represents that industry. But I think with this political atmosphere that we have in D.C. right now, and the total chaos in this administration. People saw, you can say what you want about Joe Biden, but he was a union. He did good for unions, and he wasn't embarrassed to say unions. It wasn't just working families. He said union. He gave a lot of money to workers, and this administration's not there. So I believe we can hit it. I believe we're off to a good start. We got a good foundation of growing, and union's back, and it's growing.
President Costa, I really appreciate your time. Is there anything else you'd want to talk about before we let you go?
No, I'm good. All right. Just respect our operators out there. They do a job for the public and for the economy, and when you're out there, say thank you once in a while to our public service workers. It's not an easy job, and lately it's been a very dangerous job.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Again, that was ATU President John Costa talking about organizing in the South. Pretty exciting interview. And we're going to be going into overtime here in a moment. We'll be talking in part in overtime about Elon Musk becoming a billionaire or becoming a trillionaire. And we've had some discussion in the chat about that. One of those things that from Mark saying that he gave the World Food Bank $5.7 billion. That's just not true. It's not true that he gave the World Food Bank $5.7 billion. He reported on his taxes a $5.7 billion charitable donation, but there's not a public accounting of where it went, and the World Food Program explicitly denied that it went there. So most likely it went to his own foundation, which most of the foundation has been invested in like donor advised funds and has given out, ultimately comparatively not all that much money to to charities. So not true. Just wanted to, so that people in the chat knew. You can check it out, and I'll drop a link to an article about it in the chat. Every day across the South, workers are killed on the job, stolen from, discriminated against, or sexually harassed, and sometimes the employers are caught. These are last week's stories. This is Boss Watch. Boss Watch. In Louisville, Kentucky, Jayco Enterprises, a transportation/limousine company offering services throughout Kentucky, failed to pay $95,000 to alleged victims of sexual harassment as required pursuant to a conciliation agreement the company entered into with the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the federal agency charged in a lawsuit announced today. According to the EEOC's lawsuit, a female employee filed a charge of discrimination, alleging she was sexually harassed by a male employee and that other employees were similarly harassed by the same person. On October 6, 2025, Jayco's president signed a conciliation agreement which required the company pay the original complainant $70,000 and $25,000 to other aggrieved women. The filing charged the company with failing to pay any of the money. Kenneth Bird, regional attorney for the EEOC's Indianapolis district, said Jayco's failure to pay as required under the agreement constitutes the breach of a binding contract. In the interests of the harmed parties and the general public, the EEOC will vigorously enforce the terms of the conciliation agreements that it enters into with employers. Such alleged conduct violates Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which prohibits discrimination on the basis of sex, including sexual harassment. So the EEOC filed suit in the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of Kentucky. In more Louisville, Kentucky news, Fitch Irick Management, formerly known as Gem Management, will pay $90,000 and furnish other relief to settle a sexual harassment lawsuit. According to the suit, the North Carolina-based property management company knew its Stanford, Kentucky site manager reported being sexually harassed by a coworker but failed to address it. After the company directed the employee to continue working with her harasser, the harasser told her he knew she reported his harassment and threatened to shoot and torture her. This conduct created a hostile work environment, I'll say so, and caused the employee to resign. Kenneth Bird, regional attorney for the EEOC's Indianapolis district, said if an employee reports sexual harassment by a coworker, a company must take prompt and effective action to stop and remedy the harassment. We commend Fitch Irick for its cooperation and undertaking measures to ensure that sexual harassment complaints are adequately addressed in the future. The alleged conduct violated Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which prohibits discrimination because of sex, including sexual harassment. So the EEOC filed suit in the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of Kentucky, Lexington Division, after first attempting to reach a pre-litigation settlement through its administrative conciliation process. The settlement, by court-approved public consent decree, provides for settlement funds of $90,000 to be paid to the employee, as well as management and employee training, policy revisions, and other targeted relief to be implemented by the defendant. Amy McFerrin, assistant regional attorney in the EEOC's Louisville area office, says the EEOC vigorously protects women in the workplace and is committed to ensuring that employers comply with federal law so that women are not denied equal employment opportunities because of sex. You can subscribe to the newsletter at tvlr.fm and get it in your inbox every single week, and let us know if we missed anything at tvlr.fm/donate. Or /contact, sorry.
Well, and I did have a couple of plugs to mention before we wrap up here on our first half of the show. If you missed Labor Notes, don't worry. There are online trainings you can check out. LaborNotes.org/events on July 15th. That evening at 7 p.m. Central, they're holding their next stewards workshop. That's going to be on assertive grievance handling. And this is specifically for stewards and elected officers who work with stewards. So not for staffers or just rank and file folks. Pretty limited capacity on this one, but highly recommend it if you are dealing with grievances in your workplace. This is a great workshop to check out. Again, that's July 15th, that evening. And really excited to see this. They are going to be restarting their Secrets of a Successful Organizer online series at the end of July. July 29th will be the first session at 6:30 p.m. Central. And this is like the core organizing training for Labor Notes. There are going to be 3 sessions. I really recommend you go to it if you've never attended any of these trainings from Labor Notes. I highly recommend you bring friends, bring coworkers, send this around to folks. It is well worth it. You're not going to get this kind of organizing training in many other places or spaces. So again, that first session of 3 is going to start July 29th. Go to labornotes.org/events and you can find out all about it. You can register, sign up, do all that jazz. So just want to lift that up. I know lots of folks wanted to go to Labor Notes conference, couldn't make it for whatever reasons, but really appreciate that they do these online trainings. And then I will also make a plug that you can always work with Labor Notes to bring training to your neck of the woods. Jacob and I have worked with Labor Notes on 2 occasions or 3 occasions or 4 occasions. I can't even remember. We've worked with them to bring training to Alabama. And those partnerships have trained hundreds of Southerners here in the state of Alabama through troublemaker schools and other events. So, be encouraged. Definitely bring some of that spirit from Chicago back home and find ways to educate and organize your fellow workers. So check out labornotes.org/events. And again, if you're interested in doing any kind of training locally in person, reach out to them. I'm sure they'd love to help.
We're going to be going into overtime momentarily. We will have a picket line report from St. Mary's Hospital in Chicago, Illinois. We'll also be talking to Kieran Knutson, CWA president in Minneapolis, about the indictments, and Alex Press about the LaborNotes convention. So make sure you stay tuned for that, folks. We're going to have great conversations. We were going to be talking to Nick Livick, a UAW member who was at LaborNotes and the UAW Constitutional Convention. Something came up. He's not going to be able to make it, so I think we'll probably try to have him on next week to talk about the UAW convention. Lots of really cool stuff happened there. So yeah, got a great overtime lined up for you, and looking forward to sharing it with you. Depending on how long the interviews go, we might be able to play another of the pre-taped conversations from the AFL-CIO convention. I was able to interview the Tech Institute Executive Director, Lauren McFerrin. She was also the board chair for the National Labor Relations Board, although unfortunately wasn't able to talk to her about NLRB stuff. The AFL-CIO was like, we want to make sure that if she says something about the NLRB, then, it might be perceived as like saying something on behalf of the AFL and blah, blah, blah. And so I was like, well, okay. That's a bummer, though.
Yeah. Yeah, a bummer, but glad you got to talk to her for
Yeah, it was a great conversation. Y'all are going to enjoy it whenever we do get to play it. So you're listening to the Valley Labor Report. Find us on YouTube, Facebook, at the Valley Labor Report, Facebook, YouTube, etc. to keep listening to the program. If you don't do that, we appreciate you spending some time with us on your Saturday morning, and we will see you next week. All right. We're off the radio now. Appreciate everybody hanging out with us. We're going to take a break, and we'll be right back.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell.
This is Overtime, a production of the Valley Labor Report, the largest union talk radio and online news outfit in the South, now broadcasting in Minneapolis and Chicago across the Mason-Dixon line. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. We appreciate you spending some time with us. We've got a great show lined up for you today. First up, we're going to play a picket line report from St. Mary's Hospital in Chicago, Illinois. This is an incredibly exciting story. These nurses who have now won their union. They had not yet had their union election when they first went on strike. I mean, most unions never even go on strike these days, but these workers went on strike before they were even officially a union, and they did it because 6 of the leaders of the organizing campaign were fired for their participation in the campaign. At least that is how their coworkers saw it. And so to protest their coworkers being fired for supporting the union, everybody decided we're going to go out on strike to try to get them their jobs back. I don't think they have their jobs back yet, but that is still a point of contention, and the union is fighting for them to get their jobs back. They did win their union election. We'll talk more about that after the picket line report. One more thing before we play this audio. It would literally... There was a tornado. They broke the picket line down 15 minutes after I finished doing these interviews because there was a tornado warning. So it's super windy. We were able to kind of get most of it to be listenable. There's a couple of pretty gnarly points in there. So, kind of prep yourself for not the best audio in the world because there was a tornado, okay? They were striking, and look at me. I was journalisming, right? Reporting in the middle of a tornado. That's pretty impressive. I'm not saying that you should be impressed, but I'm saying maybe that's impressive. I don't know. Potentially. Let's play our picket line report from St. Mary's in Chicago.
We have to unionize because all these insincere promises will disappear in a minute. So we have to make sure we unionize. We have to fight.
Can you introduce yourself and tell us what your job in the hospital was?
Yeah, my name is Carly Thorne, and I have been an ER nurse at St. Mary's for the past 4 years.
And we're on the picket line right now. I think people can hear it in the background, but I think we're close enough that hopefully the audio is fine. Why are y'all striking right now?
Yeah, today we are out here striking because we had a total of 6 nurses that were fired illegally by Prime, and our demands were very simple. Hire back the 6 nurses, stop the union busting, or else we're going to strike, and Prime did not meet those demands, so here we are today.
You were one of those nurses that was fired, right?
Yes.
Why did they say they fired you?
They said they fired me because I was trespassing.
Trespassing at your job?
Yes. Trespassing at my job. Very ironic.
Yeah. So, I guess what, were you passing out union lit, when you're off the clock or something? Is that what was going on?
That's what I assume they are talking about.
They haven't even given you a specific instance of
No, they just told me on this date you were trespassing.
Wow.
During that time, we had been leafleting, and I think that's what they're talking about, but that's just my assumption. It was off the clock in non-work areas, on public property. We were very clear to follow, do it the right way, so.
Right. Can we get a little bit closer to this? Sorry. And how did that feel when they told you that?
Yeah, it was very surreal. It felt fake and what is going on here? It just didn't feel real. And then it was more the emotions really hit you, this is real, and it's very upsetting, and you kind of go through a whole slew of emotions, but at the end of the day, we're sad. We want our jobs back. We love working with our patients, we love our coworkers, and we want to return to work.
How does it feel having, I'm getting emotional a little bit just thinking about this, but all these people out here striking for you and 5 other nurses. What is that? How does that feel?
Yeah, and right now is a smaller turnout. This morning was amazing. We had so many supporters. So it is really awesome to have this many people out here just saying we want our 6 coworkers back to work, and we're gonna stand together, and we're gonna unite, and we're gonna get them back.
Wow.
This says everything,
Yeah. That's incredible. That was the Chicago Fire Department. Looks like responding to a call and honking in support. I mean, that's incredible.
Yeah.
That's so awesome. How did y'all start this campaign? Like, what was the thing that made y'all want to organize a union?
Yeah, I think as far as I've been at St. Mary's, there has been slow whispers about we maybe want a union, but once Prime took over last year, it was clear that something needed to change, and if we weren't going to do it, nothing was ever going to change. So I think Prime buying the hospital really was the catalyst for us starting our union efforts.
And what is Prime?
Prime is Prime Healthcare. They're the company that bought St. Mary's. They're a healthcare company.
Is that Amazon Prime, or is it a different deal? It's not the same oligarchs.
No. Oh, similar, but not the same. Still on the same path of not treating their employees fairly. But it's Prime Healthcare. They have bought quite a few hospitals in the last year over Chicago, including ours. So.
Gotcha. Well, I won't keep you too much longer. I really appreciate you taking the time. What would you say to nurses I'm from the South. We're broadcasting all over the place right now, but, I'm in the South. What would you say to nurses who are thinking about organizing a union but are scared to do so because of, what you're going through right now?
Yeah, I think it's rightful to be scared, but I think nothing has ever come without a fight or without a struggle, and if you don't have to fight for it, it's probably not worth it. At the end of the day, the nurses make up so much of the hospital, absolute majority, and together, you all have the power to form a union if you want to, so go for it if you want to.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Tratamiento de cáncer de mama. Supe que en ese momento yo quería ejercer una profesión.
Hello, my name is Brenda Hernandez. I work in the ICU at St. Mary Hospital in Chicago.
We're here on the picket line. Y'all are striking, protesting some of your coworkers getting fired. Can you talk about why you decided to take that step?
Absolutely. We decided to come here and strike because Prime had a notice of 10 days. They did not want to reinstate our coworkers, so our voice had to be heard, and this is the only way that Prime is going to listen to us.
A lot of people, it would be really easy to say that, oh, well, that's too bad. It's not, it's not good that this happened. But actually going out and striking and putting yourself out on the line, that takes a lot of kind of dedication. Why did you decide to take that step?
We're a union. We're all together. If one gets fired, it impacts everyone.
Have you been part of the organizing campaign since the beginning?
Not the beginning. Actually, started a few months ago, but no, not at the beginning.
What made you want to get involved in the campaign?
We need a change. Prime had more than a year to make things better, according to them, and they squeezed as much as they could until we said this is enough.
What would you say to nurses who are thinking about organizing, but maybe they're scared to take that step?
Don't be scared. Please don't be scared. You have all the support of the union. Everything is done legally. Don't be scared. You have to. This is the only way that your voices are going to be listened to. This is the only way that you can go ahead and get a seat on the table and ask for what you need and demand, and it's for the best of the patients.
Is there anything else you'd like to say?
Thank you for coming out.
Thank you. That was a picket line report from, again, St. Mary's Hospital in Chicago. Unfortunately, we were not able to get to salvage the interview that we did with a community member who was out there on the picket line, but we did do an interview with a community member out there. Like you heard there, really exciting story. They won their union election. By 97%.
Wow.
Yeah. After 6 of the union leaders had been fired. I mean, that's a really, really incredible. That
is a huge
result.
victory.
Yeah.
That is a really huge victory. And like you said, the idea that your coworkers would go on strike for you,
Mm-hmm.
and that is such a huge sacrifice and a really a testament to the organizing those nurses have been doing up there. So. Much love and solidarity, and thank you for inspiring all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. We I have like totally messed up the formatting somehow of the show notes document, so we're not going to be able to use it for the rest of the show. But we've got on the line now, I believe, Kieran Knutson, president of the CWA Local 7250 in Minneapolis, Minnesota. He'll be coming on in just a moment. We're going to be talking to him about the indictments in Minnesota of 15 people who were involved in the anti-ICE protests by the federal government, many of whom are union members and were active in the labor movement there. Workday magazine has a really good article about what's been going on and the indictments and the labor movement's response to it. Also about LaborNotes has an article by one of the people who were indicted and arrested that presumably he wrote from prison about his experience in prison with the other co-defendants. That's really moving. Y'all should check it out. And, you know, if you have the ability, donate to their legal defense fund. I mean, just a really, really gross abuse of power here and a clear attempt to dissuade people from protesting against the administration's actions and supporting your neighbors and your coworkers. So he's joining now, and then before we start talking about that, we're also going to be talking some about his origin story, which will be very fun. He was a member of a group called the Baldies, I think in Minneapolis. I can't remember if it was Minneapolis or somewhere else, but I'll let him tell you what the Baldies were. But I think we've got him on now. Kieran Knutson, president of CWA Local 7250. Thank you for taking the time to join the Valley Labor Report this morning.
I'm very happy to be here. I'm a big fan of the show.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you listening. Means a lot coming from somebody like you who's been so active and has taken such a role in a place like Minneapolis. I mean, it's great to have you with us. I wanted to bring you on to talk about the indictments, but before we do that, we can talk about things that are a little bit more lighthearted. And I'd like for you to share with the audience how you came up politically and your organization with the Baldies.
Yeah, sure. So I am born and raised in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And in my teenage years, I was part of a kind of a youth group of anti-racist skinheads. And I know people are used to thinking of skinheads as being neo-Nazi or white supremacists, but actually the true roots of that subculture are in the mix of West Indian culture and working class English culture in the big cities in Britain. And so it's kind of a subgroup of punk rock, if you will, or became that. And so in the Twin Cities, there was a crew of kids called the Baldies, and we ended up in conflict with a group of Nazi skinheads called the White Knights. And, basically they were trying to intimidate and bully kids of color, gay bash, do things like that. And we stood up to them and basically chased them out of the scene. And out of that, we got sort of more politicized, and built a network across the Midwest first, and then across the country and across North America of other young people that were interested in organizing direct action against the fascists. And not just interested in it, but kind of doing it as a means of survival, because in different scenes all across the country, there was sort of a competition for space and the ability to function in all these different youth scenes. And anti-racist action played the role of, helping young people organize to defend themselves and backing them up. And then also from there we went and took on various Ku Klux Klan chapters, including groups in the South who were trying to organize in the Midwest, and became just sort of a pretty strong and powerful youth direct action movement. There's a great book about it that's out now called We Go Where They Go, which was one of the philosophies of the group, which was that we don't cede any territory to the white supremacists and the neo-Nazis. If they're organizing in small towns, we're going to organize in small towns. If they're organizing in suburbs, we're going to organize in suburbs. If they're organizing in cities, we're going to organize in cities. And and we help build, chapters all across this country in all kinds of places like that.
That's, really, really awesome. And I'm seeing here that there was also a documentary about it by TPT. Were you interviewed for that documentary?
Yeah, it's a really great documentary that was made by the public television network here a couple years back. That gives just a real feel for what that moment was like in the Twin Cities history and amongst, my friends. So it was really great to see it. It's also got really great music, I think, in it, and gives you a flavor of what it's like for young people who are being politicized and figuring out how to organize, and what that's like.
Can people still find you at punk shows in Minneapolis, or is it a little bit too loud now?
I definitely, my hearing took a beating. It's no doubt about that. I think my younger friends are used to me leaning in and, asking them to repeat themselves. But I do love live music. I don't get to see it as much as I used to. But all kinds, we listen to, just as much as we listen to punk, we listen to hip hop and reggae and ska and all kinds of other music. So yeah, I'm a big fan of live music. I wish I had more time to go see more.
And so how did you go from, the political sort of punk scene into the labor movement? How did that transition happen?
Well, y'all got to work. And, I think when we were younger, at least me and my friends, we kind of had that culture where we'd work a job for a few months or a couple years and then quit, move on to something else, try to sort of keep flexible so we could take road trips and party with our friends and also do political projects. But as you get older, you kind of have to find a little more stability, unless you want to have, if you're trying to live beyond just having like 10 roommates and stuff like that. So that means getting a job. And, I was a pretty committed fighter by that time, and organizer. And so I first started off working at UPS, and that was a very big learning experience for me. I got hired in right around the time Ron Carey was elected president of the Teamsters. And so the team, that there was a kind of politicized environment within the Teamsters union around that. The local I was in was an old guard local that was very opposed to Ron Carey and opposed to militancy. But there was a group of workers in the local who were fighting to be more democratic and more militant. And so that was a great learning environment for me, and also just seeing how UPS treats people and figuring out what does it mean to organize, with workers who don't necessarily come out of the same subculture, don't necessarily like the same music I like, don't hang out the same places I hang out, but how do you organize with people that you work with? And I worked at UPS for 10 years. I actually worked for UPS in 3 different cities in the Twin Cities, Detroit and Chicago. And in Detroit, I was part of the big 1997 strike that, was so influential on the union and really the labor movement at that time. And that was a big learning experience for me. And then in Chicago, I was part of a huge local 705 that at that time had like 20,000 members. And so when you went to a union meeting, if you got up to speak, you might be speaking in front of 700 or 800 people, with half of them booing you and half of them cheering for you. So again, that was a great sort of boot camp for becoming a labor organizer and activist. And then I lost my job at UPS at a time when my partner and I, we had 2 small children, and she had just quit her job so she could stay home with our real young newborn. So it was really the wrong time for me to lose my job, but I did. And then I got a job at a telecom corporation where I had a cousin that worked, and she told me about a job. And so I've been working there now for 23 years. And that's organized by the communications workers, which is a whole different world than the Teamsters. So it took a little adjustment. And just kind of jumped right back into it. There was a group of young workers in my local who were trying to get more involved in the union, and kind of the old guard there was suspicious of them and trying to keep them out of being involved. So I immediately felt sympathy for them. And even though I hadn't been there very long, I also had more experience in the unions than they did, so I could kind of give them advice. And out of that, we sort of built our own network within our local, and then eventually started running for some positions in the local and making some big changes in the local. Building stewards networks in the local is kind of the thing that I kind of did and was most proud of, and I think helped then lay the basis for me running for president 6 years ago. And and so our local has been very involved in both fighting the boss on all kinds of fronts, but also trying to have a concept of a defense organization for the entire working class, so that when we say an injury to one is an injury to all, we're not just talking about our members or CWA, but we're talking about all workers. And that kind of sets us up for the discussion today about what's been going on in Minnesota.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I didn't realize that you had been a member of the Teamsters and had some run in. I don't know if you were ever like a TDU member, but were sort of, presumably on like the supportive side of Ron Carey. And that was such an interesting time in the labor movement's history in the United States. There were reform successes in the Teamsters. The AFL-CIO was taken over by more progressive, reform-minded leadership, and we saw the creation of a Labor Party in the 1990s. And and there was a lot of reason, but to potentially be hopeful. I think that there could be some inroads there, because I think in the 90s, really more than most other periods of U.S. history, both political parties were just very, 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 very similar. There was almost no daylight between the Democrats and the Republicans in the 90s, and so it seemed like there could be an opening for reform leadership in the unions, for the labor movement to take more political leadership and show, a third way, but a better third way. And so I'm curious, before we go into the talking about Minneapolis today, any observations that you would have about the labor movement in the 90s and the reform movement within the labor movement in the 90s, and comparisons and contrasts to kind of the moment that we're in today?
That's a good question. I think that, my orientation was always really towards working class militancy and direct democracy on the shop floor, and networks that could be built among workers sort of across the industry, and connected or federated with other industries. And so, my political orientation and my organizational orientation was less, aimed at the tops of the unions or the electoral system. It was more oriented towards, what kinds of networks can we build of workers that are willing to organize direct action in their workplaces and build power for workers, on the job and in their communities. And I think that's still kind of our perspective. And I do think that there's always, this system that we live under does breed resistance, because they try and squeeze every last drop out of us at work, and they beat us down pretty hard. So it can be very easy to be demoralized and feel weak and isolated. But obviously, collectively, we actually do have quite a bit of power if we choose to use it and organize ourselves to use it. And I think that right now, there's a moment where there's been several waves of struggle. I mean, in the Twin Cities in particular, there's been some really sharp struggles over the last 10 and 20 years. And a lot of people, regular working class people, have been pulled into these movements and have learned a lot of lessons from it, and have also networked with each other and have experience and have confidence of having stood up to, the government or stood up to their employers. And that's all laid the basis for where we're at now. So I think today there's a great moment, probably the biggest in my lifetime, of an opportunity for, working class people to build our own sort of sphere of of politics and activity and, fighting ability and solidarity. And so that's kind of what I'm oriented to.
Right. So we ran into each other both at the AFL-CIO convention and the LaborNotes convention. Minneapolis, the Twin Cities, featured very, very prominently at both conventions. I'm curious about any reflections that you might have as a Minneapolis unionist yourself.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of, thankfully, there's a lot of support and embrace of Minneapolis and the resistance that happened here to ICE, to the ICE occupation of Minnesota. I hope that that doesn't become just sort of a symbolic thing. I think that, the resistance, what was key about the resistance here was that it was, the self-activity of the people and of working people in particular, and that we very clearly were not getting help from, the big politicians and the state machinery, even though they would say some clever quotes against ICE from time to time. The way that they played out in the streets was not one of supporting the people. And that includes the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party runs Minnesota, and they were very much, while they made some statements against ICE, in real life in the streets, their police forces were supporting and backing up ICE, including at times like when our union brother Alex Press was executed in broad daylight on the streets of Minneapolis, and the community came out to confront ICE. It was the Minneapolis police and the Hennepin County sheriffs that defended ICE and provided, after hours of tear gas and rubber bullets and flashbang grenades being shot at the community, mostly by ICE, but also by the MPD and the Hennepin County sheriffs. Then, those local police forces opened up a corridor for the murderers to escape. So I think that, I think it's really important people understand that if they're supporting Minnesota, that's what they should be supporting, not any politician who, says some clever things, but the actual self-activity of working people in Minnesota, because that's what beat back Operation Metro Surge, not any political party or politician.
Can you remind us what it was like being in Minneapolis under Operation Metro Surge?
Yeah, it was like nothing else I've ever experienced. The ACLU had a lawsuit against the feds, and in the discovery, it's come out that there were 4,000 agents that were sent to Minnesota. And just by way of comparison, the Minneapolis Police Department has around 700 cops, and the St. Paul Police Department has around 600 cops. So you think of those numbers, and then you think of 4,000, and you can kind of imagine what sort of presence they had in the Twin Cities. And they were all over the place. You would see them somewhat frequently, and you'd see them stopping people. People would see abductions. People were being abducted from work, taking the garbage out. People were being abducted from their homes in their bathrobes. Sometimes U.S. citizens being abducted. There was a Hmong elder in St. Paul who was abducted in his boxers and flip-flops, taken from his home, and he was a U.S. citizen. There was people that were abducted, taking their kids to daycare or picking up their kids from school. The Columbia Heights School District put out a statement saying that ICE was using their students as bait. That was the quote, using their students as bait to abduct their parents. There was all kinds of violence that happened. There were people that were beaten. There were people that were shot. There was a brother from Nicaragua who was abducted from working in the kitchen of a Korean restaurant, and 10 days later in a Texas detention camp, he was dead. The government says he committed suicide. His family says it was from injuries from the abduction. Of course, we know that with the resistance that occurred, which was so heartening and so amazing, and how depressing it would be if there wasn't this kind of resistance, but how heartening that there was. We had two people that were standing up to ICE who were executed in broad daylight in cold blood, right in front of our eyes. One sister, Renee Good, who was a mother and a poet, and she and her wife were going home after dropping off their son at school, and there was an ICE abduction taking place right on their block. And so they, along with a number of other neighbors, were confronting ICE about that when she was executed. And then Alex Preddy, another volunteer in this movement, was there when ICE was operating in another neighborhood in the Twin Cities. And when he went to aid a woman who was being pushed down by ICE, he was grabbed and thrown down and then executed again in front of us all. So I think the purpose of all that was to create a campaign of terror, of racist terror, particularly aimed at immigrant workers, but really aimed at all of us. And it's like nothing I've ever seen. It was, I think at that moment, a lot of us thought that they were going to keep escalating and that we didn't know what it would look like when they turned it up even another notch after they killed Alex Preddy. But the resistance in the streets, the mutual aid and love for their neighbors, and then the labor participation, including the great January 23rd mass strike, really showed another side of this, which is that we can stand up to this and that we are more powerful than maybe we know, and that, Trump and his thugs and his regime is not going to have the last word.
Can you talk a little bit more about how the community responded and fought back against the ICE occupation?
Yeah, so there was a few different levels of participation and activity, which was great because that meant pretty much anybody could find a way to plug in if they wanted to at a level that they felt they could sustain and that they felt comfortable and confident in. So there was a great network of rapid response, which meant that if ICE came to your neighborhood to abduct somebody, you would come out of your house and go stand with your neighbors and try and prevent that abduction. So in the neighborhood that my wife and I live in, for instance, there were 800 people on a text loop just in our neighborhood. And there were at least 80 such loops like that across the Twin Cities of neighbors that were in touch with each other and could update each other on ICE activity in the neighborhood and could respond. And that's why, you see scenes of people coming out to confront ICE, blowing whistles, alerting their neighbors. And so that was a great thing. And that was kind of like the framework, the main sort of like spine of the resistance was these great rapid response networks. And then there was, in line with that, because so many immigrant workers had to basically go underground, a great many, especially Latino immigrant workers, basically had to stop going to work because it was just not safe to drive to work anymore. The racial profiling, people being pulled over on their way to or from work, people being grabbed at work, was just out of control. And I think families had to decide that it wasn't worth the risk. And so people just were bunkering down. And, my son and his partner, for instance, I'm so proud of them. They were supporting people on their block, making sure that they had groceries, making sure they had what they needed to survive, making sure people were looking out for them. And that, again, was happening on a mass scale. So there were efforts like I described with my son, where just the neighbors were coming together to make sure everybody on the block was okay. But there was also churches that were feeding thousands of people every day with groceries. And Unite Here, the hotel workers union, had a mutual aid effort for all of their hundreds of members that were having to miss work, which meant they didn't have groceries, they didn't have rent money, etc. So between the unions, the churches, and these rapid response networks, there was this great mutual aid network that was put in place to make sure that all of our people were okay. And then on top of that, there was union activity and protest activity. And so there were some immigrant rights groups that had been around for a long time that were getting people out in the street. There were more newly formed groups of young people and young workers and radicals that were coming together to organize to do like civil disobedience at the main ICE headquarters where ICE was dispatching from. And that's where some of the links, very much linked to the indictments that came down this past week. And also then there was the unions that were like starting to raise the idea of a shutdown and what that would look like. And I'm proud to say that our union was a part of those conversations from the beginning. We've been pushing those kinds of ideas for some time, to be thinking about them and being talking about them. Of course, it's such a big undertaking that you can't just will it into being. It takes organizing, it takes talking, it takes building relationships, and that was just an incredible effort by the unions. And that sort of also, in some ways, people have described it as from going from the defensive, meaning defending our neighbors from ICE, to going on the offensive, where we started putting pressure on the big corporations, who ultimately are the ones that call the shots in this society.
And so we asked you to come on today because there has been indictments of 15 individuals, many of whom are union members, in association with these protests. Can you tell us what they're alleged to have done and what your response to the charges are?
Yeah, so you got to remember that we now think that 300,000 people stayed home from work on January 23rd. And around 100,000 people marched in downtown Minneapolis in 20 below zero weather. And so the day after that massive show of force by the unions in the community, Alex Press was executed in what I think was an act of retaliation against the resistance. And so this should be seen as another act of retaliation against the resistance, and a means of both trying to map out who was organizing the resistance and also to punish those that were very effective at it. And so the people that were arrested or indicted this past week are kind of a microcosm of what that resistance looked like. And so there's men and women, there's queer folks and trans folks, there's young people and older people, and there's people of the 15, I believe 8 of them are union members, ranging from electricians to educators to government workers. And it's really kind of like a strike against the popular resistance in Minnesota. And the charges are these ridiculous conspiracy charges. And if you've ever looked into how the government uses conspiracy charges, it's really a lot of times aimed at people who are organizing resistance to whatever injustice is going on. And that's the case here. They are claiming that there was a conspiracy. They use the term Antifa, which is kind of a throwback to our earlier discussion about, young people organizing against white supremacists. But they're kind of creating this sort of like, scary monster that they call Antifa, but it really just means anti-fascists, is what they're talking about. And they're saying that this was a conspiracy to interfere with and to injure federal agents. Their evidence is incredibly sparse on this. It mostly consists of text messages, signal messages, social media posts, which show something that we're not ashamed to admit, which is that we were helping organize the popular resistance to ICE and to this racist campaign of terror by the Trump regime. And so the government is going to try and use this as a way to intimidate people and to try and keep people busy and sort of keep us all focused and busy with this defense campaign. But we're determined to use it as another means to educate people about what happened during the ICE occupation, why the resistance was righteous and necessary, and why we need to support the 15 people that were targeted here, because they're of us. When we say an injury to one is an injury to all, we mean it. And they're attacking 15 people, but really they're attacking all of us.
Workday magazine has an article about the indictments and about the labor movement's response. One of the labor leaders who responded in that article is Marcia Howard, president of the teacher chapter of the Minneapolis Federation of Educators, MFE Local 59. She said, "I find it telling they're going after unionists, including educators I know of right now, that they are going after workers. I'm really pissed off. I think this is intended to make workers shy away from being vociferous in their opposition to state-sponsored violence by by saying things like F ICE and ICE out. They want us to get to a point that we're scared to say things that we should be able to say, and then fuck everything. Later in the afternoon, MFE said in a statement, "This morning, DHS agents arrested a member of our union at her home." The statement added that this administration and Justice Department have repeatedly misrepresented facts about the occupation and the tens of thousands of good neighbors who opposed it, so any allegations made against our members should be viewed in that light. Chelsea Globitz-Gabillo, president of the Minneapolis Regional Labor Federation, also had a statement saying that today's federal indictments impacted several of our union members who used their voices alongside many other workers to call for an end to ICE's so far unaccountable violence. I think President Bernie Burnham had a statement as well, yes, saying this past winter the Trump administration tried to break Minnesotans' solidarity and basic sense of decency by flooding our state with armed agents. They failed. Now they're trying to break us in the courtroom. They'll fail again. St. Paul Federation of Educators also spoke out against the indictments, as did some others. And so, I mean, it seems like pretty broadly, it seems like the labor movement in Minneapolis and the Twin Cities is unanimously on the side of the defendants. Is that right? Does that article paint an accurate representation of the labor movement's response?
Yeah, there's been an incredible response, which we're so grateful for, and I think reflects, like some of the quotes you gave, the kind of unity that's been built, across different unions, different industries, different perspectives, different politics. We all know we have to have each other's back at this moment. And so I'm really, heartened and pleased that those statements have come out. Bernie has been so supportive of our local, just in general. She's come out to pickets when we've had relatively small pickets at sort of small workplaces. Here's the president of the Minnesota AFL who's standing with us. So, I've liked her from get-go. And she's been solid and principled with her solidarity, and so many other unions. Shout out to the nurses union and to MAPE, the state government workers union, for putting out statements of their own, as well as all the unions. I think there's like 50 unions and community organizations that signed a statement that SEIU 26 had kind of pulled together, including our union signed on to that as well. So yeah, there is a broad, and I think that's also reflective of what I found when we started doing ICE education in our workplace was that we already had members that were involved in the movement, that were getting involved in the resistance. And I think that that's probably true of all these other unions too, is they know that their members care about this issue, and in fact these members were participants in this movement, and that's really sort of made it easier for union leaders who can sometimes, as we know, be conservative and cautious. It's made it easier for them to take a stand and to, really have our backs.
Yes, absolutely. There's an article in LaborNotes that folks should check out by Emmett Doyle, one of the indicted co-defendants, a union carpenter in the Twin Cities, titled "From Cell to Cell, Jailed Minnesota Unionists Sang of Freedom." Folks should check it out. I mean, it's a really moving piece about, being arrested and being there with the other co-defendants. And so, I again encourage people to check that out. Kieran, as we're wrapping up here, is there anything else that you would want to say about the resistance to the ICE occupation, the indictments, and then finally, definitely, how can people help Minneapolis labor fight back?
Thanks again so much for having me on. I do want to just give a shout out to Emmett. Emmett is just the biggest sweetheart in the world, and also a dedicated, fighter for justice over many, many years. He's not that old, but he's been in the fight for many, many years, including a really principled anti-racist and anti-fascist fighter. He's also a great musician. So if anybody here likes kind of like folk music with a little edge to it, this brother can turn out the tunes. He's got a ton of songs that are just great. You can find him on Bandcamp, Emmett Doyle. And, I want to help lift up his music because he's going to be in this fight with these charges. He got pulled out of his home early in the morning, just like everyone else did who got arrested, and he'll be needing support. And then Yeah, we have a donation page up on Chuffed, CHUFFED. If you do a search for Minneapolis anti-ICE protesters, you should be able to find it. And we've gotten some great donations. LaborNotes has put it out. The musician Tom Morello has put it out. So we are getting support, but we can always use more because this is going to be a long haul. These kinds of federal charges are not ended overnight. And then the big thing is to organize where you're at. What we need is 2, 3, many Minneapolises. We need other cities to be organized and to be able to shut down the economy if they have to, in order to stand up to these attacks. I saw that there's going to be a big union mobilization on Father's Day tomorrow in New Jersey at the ICE facility there, where some CWA local is a participant. And so that makes me so happy. We need to just really encourage unions to be involved in this movement, to take your place in the movement, to bring your ideas to this movement, and to bring your members into this movement if they aren't there already. And again, I want to just thank Valley Labor Report. I want to thank all of my CWA homies in Alabama, and I really appreciate this opportunity.
All right. Kieran Knutson, president of CWA Local 7250 in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
We've got another interview lined up. We'll be talking to Alex Press, a labor reporter. She wrote in Jacobin about the LaborNotes convention. Also, we'll be talking to her about Elon Musk becoming a trillionaire. Really excited for this conversation, and really appreciate Alex Press for taking the time to join us today.
Hey, Jacob, how are you?
I'm doing good. It's good to see you again.
Likewise, I know. Not a long time since we've seen each other. It's nice.
It has not been a long time at all. And so, like I said, you're a labor reporter. You had an article in Jacobin about the LaborNotes convention. But before we did that, you're a labor reporter. You've written for socialist magazines. I'm sure you have opinions about Elon Musk becoming the world's first trillionaire. Give us your first reactions to that.
Yeah, not in favor of this.
Bold position on the Valley Labor Report.
Good for him, Somebody worked hard, and he's breaking the glass ceiling. No, I mean, look, as you know, Jacob, and probably as most of your listeners know, it's kind of spitting in the face of working people, not just in America, but around the world, right? Elon's activities and companies stretch from one end of the supply chain to the other, and from the ground level in the mining world up through space and other planets. So this is a cosmic threat for all of us, I would say. I mean, it's obscene, right? Billionaires have so much money that's extracted from other people. A trillion, on some level isn't even a real number, right? What does this mean, in fact? I would say that Elon Musk is especially pernicious, in my opinion, as far as the capitalist class goes in this country. He is so openly and vehemently anti-worker. I think there are so many examples we can look at with his companies, from union busting, SpaceX employees that started trying to organize, to the giant Tesla plant in Fremont, California, that has seen, and I think listeners and viewers should Google what the EEOC complaints at that around racial discrimination in that plant are. It was like the most old school racism, where you have white management, like on a frequent basis, several of them using the N-word to refer to their black employees with kind of threats and nooses in the plant. Systematic in a way that Elon Musk certainly, if not, encourages this sort of thing. He knows about this, and he doesn't care. This is one company after another, all of which are so often based on kind of labor arbitrage, extracting value from working people and finding new ways to kind of collapse public services. So I don't like the guy. That's my take.
So I have a weekly hit on the local conservative program on one of the stations that we were on two of the in Chattanooga and Huntsville. And so he was talking to me about, you're a commie, Jake. Yeah, I bet you don't like that Elon Musk has $1 trillion. I bet you're really upset about it. Why? How is your life made worse? I had an answer to that. I'm curious what yours would be, but also, how would you respond to the argument that, actually, SpaceX being on, going public or whatever it was, that actually made a lot of money. It made, supposedly, I think he said 4,000 millionaires. Isn't that good, Alex, that there are 4,000 more millionaires now?
Jacob, first, I must hear what your answer to this guy was.
Well, so mine was a pretty basic kind, there are lots of reasons that people's lives are worse when inequality is huge. But the thing that I dwelt on was about the political, problem of having, there's a political problem of having billionaires. I talked about how, Bill Gates basically kind of single-handedly changed the trajectory of education in the United States through his investments and schools and administrations trying to chase his investments, and really pushed people into high-stakes testing and all of this kind of stuff. And he commissioned a report from the Rand Foundation, I believe it was, that said, actually, what you have done, your whole deal has made education worse in the United States. Actually, the results are bad. And you should have kind of just listened to what the teachers and the teachers unions were advocating for instead, and reduce class sizes and things like this. And really, Bill Gates, no education expertise at all, simply because he made $1 billion in another industry, made billions of dollars in another industry, was able to completely change the trajectory of education in the United States. And that's crazy. That nobody that is just an inappropriate inappropriate amount of power. One person should not have that amount of power in a small d democratic society. It's bad. Everything else, like, you take away all the other arguments, it's just not good for one person to be able to change the way that every American is educated for the next 30 years. That's bad. And Elon Musk has, multiple times the amount of wealth that Bill Gates does. So my life is worse off. My life is worse off, I said, because he has so much power.
It's kind of fascinating because, a lot of the ultra wealthy, Bill Gates kind of foremost among them, have usually been pretty good about kind of hiding the arbitrariness of, the fact that Bill Gates is not an expert in education, and yet kind of does this. At least he's kind of low key. You don't really notice it. The fascinating thing about Elon Musk is it's very easy for everyone to see how arbitrary his anti-democratic power is. Like, you look at his tweets and he'll post something at 3 a.m. that seems maybe a little bit inebriated. And next thing you know, it's like the news story and for the next week, and it's changing the face of how whatever issue Elon Musk was tweeting about is now thought about. I mean, it's an incredibly anti-democratic power, and he's so volatile that you would think, I've thought for many years, okay, well, Elon Musk, is so irresponsible and so openly irresponsible with this power, but it doesn't stop him, right? Because, when you look at why people value his company so much, they talk about the Elon Musk premium, that somehow he keeps getting away with it. And I don't know what that says or what we should think about that. I do know that, as you said, it's not a secret what Elon Musk's kind of goals are. And fundamentally, they're incredibly hypocritical, right? SpaceX, so many of these companies rely on government contracts, and yet his entire role is about decimating government services and, cutting the federal workforce and all of these things and demonizing working people. I agree with you, Jacob. It's a problem of a scale that I think a lot of us regular people have trouble even fathoming what it means to have that much power and that much money to fully, as we've seen with whether it's Twitter or anything else. Elon Musk is happy burning millions and millions and billions of dollars on, a pet project or something that rubbed him the wrong way. So woe to all of us who now, we are kind of his enemies in many ways. He has just more resources to try to destroy other people in this country, and he's going to do it. So I think it's a very depressing thing. I think it's depressing as a milestone to achieve during LaborNotes. But it's not like anybody in the labor movement is unaware of who the enemies are and how powerful they are. And that's probably, I mean, I know you want to ask about the piece. I mean, that's part of the feeling, I think, among working people, not just in the labor movement right now, is like things are really, really bad. It's a very dark moment.
And so you're not convinced by the argument that there's 4,000 more millionaires now, and that's really great? You don't think that's a great thing?
No, I don't think that's a great thing.
Okay.
I don't think that outweighs any of the costs, nor maybe does it count as a pro in the first place.
Yeah, I think that actually goes on the opposite side. It's probably actually maybe not good if there's 4,000. They probably have disproportionate power, but the scale of the trillionaire is just so outweighed that we don't even notice the millionaires anymore. But it's probably still not good that there are so many of them. But
I mean, I just want to say that, like, I mean, it's so hard to visualize the amount of money that $1 trillion is.
Yes.
You know, I was remember when this news came out, I was looking, and it's more than 3%, 3.5% of the U.S. GDP. Elon Musk is now worth. I mean, this is a country of hundreds of millions of people. I mean, it's just unbelievably undemocratic in so many ways. And again, it's not like Elon earned this in any way, right? It is, he has wormed his way into a role where he is just a magnet for funds. And we should ask why people are so glad to kind of build him up further and further right now.
It's completely absurd. Ben Burgess has something in Jacobin to try to help illustrate even just the difference between $1 billion and $1 trillion. Yeah. He said, imagine a vampire who came to the New World with Christopher Columbus in 1492. Every day from the moment he landed to the present, the vampire somehow managed to earn or steal the equivalent of 1,000,2026 American dollars. The vampire just stacks money in the coffins. He isn't earning interest and never spends any of it. In this example, the vampire would become a billionaire in 1495, just 3 years later, but it would take him almost 3,000 years to become a trillionaire. That would happen sometime in the 43rd century. In 2026, he wouldn't even be a fifth of the way there. So, I mean, that's crazy. That's not a real number.
No, it's not a real number. And I mean, to be fair, what does it mean when someone's worth this money in stocks and shares? I mean, but regardless, that money does go towards continuing the projects that Elon and his buddies are all pushing. And so money well spent for them, and money kind of spent against us. And so more of it for them and less of it for us.
And so you kind of gestured at it, but what do you think is the cosmic significance? Do you think there's some universal, potentially like a foreshadowing going on here that that there were 5,000 union militants trying to strategize about how to put the movement back in the labor movement on the same day that we get our first trillionaire? Is the author of the story doing some foreshadowing here, or what's going on?
I guess we'll have to keep reading to find out, won't we, Jacob?
I guess so. So for the uninitiated, what is LaborNotes?
Yeah, so LaborNotes it's part organizing project, part publication. So this article and what we're talking about is the conference that they put together every 2 years. But I'd say, just to take a step back, LaborNotes formed in, they kind of got going in the early 1980s as the creation of rank and file labor militants. So like working rank and file members of unions who were unhappy with the lack of democracy in their unions, which has connections to accepting concessions at the bargaining table, decreasing power, giving up on new organizing, all these trends that were well underway in the 1980s. These were members of these unions who said, we have to do something to try to make, as the LaborNotes slogan or tagline kind of goes, putting the movement back in the labor movement. So, if your viewers and audience are familiar with their kind of the newsletter and the website, there's all kinds of practical stuff in there, from like the Steward's Corner, a lot of nuts and bolts stuff, a lot of writing by union members who are involved in the news stories that, say, people like me might write about. This is where they kind of tell their own narrative and kind of give their own kind of takeaways and key kind of lessons learned. But, being not just a publication, but kind of an organizing project that tries to feed and build this wing of the labor movement, the troublemaker wing, as the LaborNotes people call it. They've been holding this conference every 2 years. It started in Detroit because, LaborNotes in the 80s was very tied to the TDU caucus, the Teamsters for Democratic Union, and the UAW's reformers in that union. So they've moved to Chicago. I would say, like, I speak to a labor sociologist in the piece who's been going since the 90s to the conference, and he says that back in the 90s it was shocking when they broke 1,000 people. Like the LaborNotes staff were like flabbergasted by this, and now, as you said, it's 5,000 people. I spoke to the LaborNotes people. I think they said they had to turn 1,500 people away. They're moving to an even bigger location next time. So this thing is continuing to grow, and it is a place that I think really notably. This is not like any other union conference or convention where you have the leadership speaking from the stage and you have a few delegates maybe speaking. This is by and for the rank and file, both union and not yet union. It is workers putting together these panels, it's workers speaking on these panels, and it's workers in the audience listening and speaking with those at the front. So I really, I was talking to people in Chicago and from around the world, and we were all kind of saying, I'm not sure if any conference like this exists anywhere, not just in the United States, that is so entirely about the rank and file of the labor movement.
It really is a unique experience to be able to be at. I've told people several times over the last couple of weeks that, like, I enjoy union conventions and union conferences, but, like, I'm not going to pay to go. I mean, if my local sends me, that's great, and I'll represent my local, and I'll do a nice report, and I'll tell people about it, but, like, I'm not paying. I will and have and usually do pay to go to LaborNotes. It's it's a great experience. There's so much practical education that you can get. I mean, it's just really great. And I was really glad to see in your piece that they said that they are moving to a bigger facility next time, because I think that it's been there for 3 or 4 times in a row, and it's very clear that they've kind of outgrown that facility. Do you have any idea, like, did they tell you how many people the new facility that they're going to is going to be able to accommodate?
So I think the place they're going, I don't think this is, I guess I won't say where, but my understanding is this place can fit maybe up to 10,000. I think it's the biggest convention center in Chicago. And so my hope is that that's the number. And we can't really ask LaborNotes to get any bigger than that, because now they've run out of any locations, and Chicago is kind of the big convention center city in the center of the country. But that's my hope, is that if they had to turn 1,500 away plus some, I'm sure, who didn't even bother trying to get on the wait list, that this would accommodate. It's a unique place, and I think it is. I think a lot of people, when we think about certainly like left-wing rallies, but maybe even also labor rallies, it's kind of like a rah-rah preaching to the choir kind of thing. I think LaborNotes is so practical in a way that is very different. Yes, there are like the plenaries and kind of moving speeches, and of course everyone is incredibly inspiring, but I really don't, I see it as such a unique place that people actually kind of generate projects and plans coming back from LaborNotes in a way that I think makes it quite unique. And to your point, Jacob, worth getting there if you can, to experience it yourself.
That's super exciting. Really glad. And I think that they will be able to get 10,000. I mean, like you said, they turned 1,500 away, but I mean, imagine how, there's no doubt thousands of people that didn't even try because they knew that it was, that the capacity had already been reached. And so, we've talked a little bit about what what LaborNotes is and what they do. Is there anything else to say about what the conferences, the biannual conferences, seek to do?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure the LaborNotes folks all have their own answers for this, but I mean, to me, what I see, and I'm not sure actually if this was my 4th or 5th LaborNotes, but I've been going for about a decade now. What I see is like there's several levels, right? Like there's so many practical workshops, and this has only grown completely overwhelming with the growth in size. Like basic things about how my friend, ran a panel this time that was how to run a meeting efficiently, like how to turn grievances into organizing, nuts and bolts things about, a contract campaign, all of that, of course, in extremely detailed, labor council kind of democracy, all of that. Then there's bigger political questions, right? About like, what are the political solutions, say, to declining labor power in America? And, while you can go to talks like that at universities, or you can read, kind of pundits speaking to these things, these are workers kind of speaking to these answers. And I think that is really unique. But I'd say probably the biggest, most important project of LaborNotes, especially for a new attendee, is it's evidence that you're part of a movement, right? It's this immense immersion for 48 or 72 hours in the mass movement of people like you. I think, I'm based in New York City, and I think a lot of people, say on the left or in the labor movement here, take for granted that, oh yeah, I'm sick of going to all these rallies. There's always some sort of labor talk going on, or left-wing talk. I think for a lot of people who go to LaborNotes, this is, especially for their first time, this is like a life-changing kind of immersion. It's one thing to know abstractly you're in a movement. It's another to be in a room of people who are so excited to kind of strategize and figure out, how can you do what they did and how can they do what you did. And so many people go, of course, as groups, whether as kind of part of their caucus, part of their local, part of their not yet organized workplace. This is a collective project where you each split up what you're going to figure out and who you're going to talk to, and then you come back completely ready to kind of take your campaign or your organizing to the next stage. I think it's a really practical event for a lot of people.
Absolutely. And you talked a little bit about some of the, the vibes at LaborNotes in your piece, which is titled No Illusions and No Retreats for Union Militants at LaborNotes. And that's something that I got a lot as well when I was talking to people. They really couldn't put their finger on it, but they felt like the vibes at this year's LaborNotes were just a little bit different. Can you, what did you make of that?
Yeah, I think it may be the case that it's more the past few were a bit anomalous. The past 6 or 8 years in the United States have been kind of a remarkable kind of dissonant moment, right? Where there's been a lot more excitement about labor organizing, whether it's these high profile wins like the Starbucks Workers United campaign, which spread like wildfire across the country, whether it was the Amazon labor unions win at JFK 8 and additional organizing attempts that are still in the works. The strike, the stand-up strike by the UAW, the first time the UAW ever struck all 3 of the big 3 automakers in America at the same time. There have been big stories and also a generational kind of cheering on of those stories. Young people who've gone through, grown up in immense inequality, lived through the pandemic, kind of experienced that pandemic, many of them with their coworkers, kind of forced to realize that it was them who were taking care of each other, not the employer. There are all these things that have led people to be very pro-labor in the United States. And yet at the same time, there hasn't actually been a growth in density. Things are really bad. And I think that was kind of finally very on display. That was the vibe of sorts. Whether we're talking about working people being arrested and kidnapped by ICE, whether we're talking about Trump's incredible appetite for now endless war, and dividing the working class in an incredibly pernicious way around race and immigration status, around transness and gender identity. I think the kind of the excitement of the past few, where there were these wins, was kind of had matured or had left into an incredible sense of our backs are against the wall, and this is a time for seriousness. And so I think that was reflected, right? At the same time, it's important to say that, again, when I would find people who this was their first conference and these were just rank and file workers, there's still that effervescence and ebullience kind of in the room about the excitement of getting to meet other people like yourself who are doing the same projects. Right. So it's not that it was all dour and kind of doom in the room. I think there was just a sobriety, is the word I use a lot in the piece. Because we're not winning, right? Things are really, really bad. And we saw that in kind of a dramatic way, that the next day after the end of LaborNotes, several of the attendees who were from the Twin Cities that had been kind of the site of ICE's occupation and then mass resistance, including a general strike to get ICE out of the cities. 2 of those attendees at LaborNotes were then part of what now is being called the Minneapolis 15 people who were targeted by the federal authorities and arrested. 6 union members among those 15, 2 of whom were at LaborNotes. So it's not a joke, right? I think there's just a sense that this is a time for seriousness.
In sharing your article, Luis, staffer at LaborNotes, said this year's conference did not project certainty. The dominant mood was more sober in recent years. The challenges facing workers were constantly present in conversation, and yet the conference's size is a reminder that workers are looking for places to not only talk about those challenges, but collectively strategize about how to overcome them. Sobriety and hope might be thought of as opposites. At this year's LaborNotes conference, they could be found alongside each other. I thought that was a really good summary of some of the tensions that you were pointing to in your article. And one of those places where you could see tension was in the panel about data centers. I know those are a very controversial subject right now within and without the labor movement. Could you talk about some of the tensions that were specific to the data center conversation, and how did the panelists and attendees grapple with that?
Yeah, I mean, this is a debate that I think is really kind of important and gets at such difficult questions, not only for the labor movement, but for, you know, the entirety of the United States population, not to mention the global population. This was a panel that was, I think the title was Data Centers and Union Power. And it was fascinating. I mean, I went because there were several members of IBEW, so electricians that were on data center sites. One was a steward on a data center site in Virginia. Another, I think, was a business agent for the local in that area that has been experiencing a data center boom. You know, an area makes sense kind of just outside Washington, D.C. And, you know, I think it's remarkable because I think a lot of people on the left, and rightly so, or even a lot of people in the U.S., regardless of left or right, are really turning against data centers as they learn more about them. You know, I think it's like something like 55% of people of any political affiliation say they're strongly opposed to having a data center in their community. These are extractive, resource-heavy projects that also the noise, it sounds like you're living on an airport runway. I mean, I also wasn't aware of this until videos started coming out of the sound. So there's many reasons that people, the public, the community has an issue with data centers, not to mention that they're feeding AI, which people have all kinds of issues of their own with. And yet the people building these data centers, like the two people on this panel, in addition to the one that was critical of them, you know, they were there speaking to the fact that this has doubled the size of their local, that like people are finally able to stay on one job site and stay in their area instead of traveling for work, that like, you know, this has been a completely revolutionary moment for them, that, you know, they feel like the local is more active than ever, can organize new people, can bring in new apprentices, all very true things. And this has always been a problem in, you know, in the US labor movement, especially the building trades often benefit from projects that are socially harmful, right? I think that's just the best way to put it. And of course, the dark joke is, you know, that, you know, they'll build any prison to put you in as long as they get the contract. And I think that's an unfair way to put it, but it is a real conversation about what would it mean for the rest of not just the US labor movement, but the rest of Americans who are opposed to these things, to actually take seriously the need for building trades members, for blue collar workers in the construction trades, to have other work, right? Because we can't just say like, screw them. It's a real concern. As long as they have it, they're going to be at the local kind of hearings and city hall meetings and in advocating in favor of this. And so it would be very powerful if we as a labor movement could figure out a way to get a kind of just transition and jobs so that we could have these workers actually speaking against the need for these projects. And so that was kind of the discussion of the panel. The other speaker was from Cornell University's kind of critical research center on AI. So they laid out kind of the cons of AI. There wasn't quite as much direct debate as I wanted, though, but it kind of the fact that the room was so full of, you know, the majority of the people in the room when asked said that they were building trades members. So many of them were there because they were critical of data centers. And I think there's a lot of kind of organizing now and kind of a lot of ferment in the labor movement around, you know, what do we do about this? I think I just want to say one more thing is I hadn't quite realized that I think it's 75% of non-residential construction in the United States over the past year has been for data centers. This is the majority of construction jobs now. Like, I think a lot of people do not realize the speed at which this is growing. So I think a lot of people are not aware of this tension and the need to address it, but LaborNotes is precisely the kind of place where you see it front and center. Yes, so I did write about that quite a bit in the piece. I think it's one of those intractable problems that people need to start taking very seriously.
Yes, absolutely. Again, the article is No Illusions and No Retreat for Union Militants at LaborNotes. The last thing that I wanted to ask you, I guess, is politically, you know, because LaborNotes is so focused on, you know, a lot of practical stuff and union sort of nuts and bolts, you know, I'm wondering what you think the dominant sort of political mood of the conference was, and how union members at LaborNotes were thinking about getting involved politically and how they can activate their unions to make a difference in politics.
Yeah, I mean, of course, that's a huge question, Jacob. Like, there's very different thoughts in different unions in different parts of the country. But I think the experiences that I kept hearing, at least, were one, a sense that unions had, very openly backed Joe Biden, that he had, in fact, kind of done the extent of what they expected, at least the kind of mainstream kind of unionists, and it didn't do crap for working people, right? Like, it certainly was better than Donald Trump has been, but there is a sense that, okay, we tried this and union density still went down. Inequality has not stopped rising. So I think there was a kind of frustration about a narrow sense of politics, meaning kind of a presidential campaign and devoting union resources in such an immense way to that at the expense of other kind of, whether it's new organizing projects or it's more local kind of reform efforts or candidates. I think the other thing that kind of the way politics was being discussed there was, of course, I think ICE. The attacks, ICE has been an incredibly violent thing in every part of this country, red and blue states alike. There are places where the entire community is being attacked in a disgusting and extremely, inhumane way. And I think it's created this moment where a lot of workers were speaking to the fact that they felt like, they try as they might, or maybe they used to want to avoid talking about politics. I'm a union worker. I'm going to look out for my members. I'm going to kind of look out for my fellow workers in this industry or in this locale. Kind of politics has now arrived at the workplace, right? In a way that you can no longer, and your union kind of leadership can no longer avoid, right? I think I say in the piece, the only way to lose a fight is not to hit back. And so there was a sense that, like, there needs to be a willingness to go on the offensive against, whether it's, whatever the kind of elected officials linked to these issues are, whether we're talking about ICE attacks, whether we're talking about the data center stuff, whether we're talking about the attacks on civil liberties. There were a lot of, I was speaking with kind of leaders of the News Guild and, the kind of journalist unions, and we're talking about members being shot at protests, being kind of retaliated against. There is no way to avoid the question of politics, no matter how much your union kind of would like to pretend that it can be done. So I think there's LaborNotes has often kind of evaded political questions as an organization and as a gathering, and for reasons that make plenty of sense, right? This is a place for rank and file unionists of any political affiliation or background to kind of build their movement and build the strength of working people. So, you want to make sure it's an open space for that. But at times now, I think in this moment of genuine kind of like fascist incursion in the United States, and an incredibly racist moment that is just being used to decimate what solidarity does exist among the working class here, I think it's no longer kind of feasible to avoid these political questions that go well beyond the question of, say, electing a new president or something like that.
Alex Press, labor reporter who has written for places from Jacobin to the New York Times. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. Is there anything else that you wanted to mention before we let you go?
No. Thank you so much for having me, Jacob. It's always a pleasure.
All right. Great talking to you. Unfortunately, we were not able to get Nick Livick on to talk about the UAW convention. Something came up, and he was not available today. So I think we're going to be able to get him on next weekend to talk about the UAW convention. Lots of really cool stuff happened there, as did at the LaborNotes convention. But yeah, Adam, anything else? And then if not, we can play this interview that I did with Lauren McFerrin.
Just that, I really enjoyed attending LaborNotes. It was my third time. I think you're right on in terms of the mood. It was not maybe the vibrancy that I saw, particularly 2022. And, I attribute some of that, my personal bias, it being my first time. And something, y'all were discussing just there was that really resonated with me was just the feeling of not being alone and being around so many comrades, being around so many like-minded folks who, may come from different parts of the world or country, different industries, different, types of unions or organizations, but all there because they really do believe in the power of working people organizing, coming together, building a movement. And, for someone who has been organizing here in Alabama for the last 15 years, it was really special for me, to be in a room of 4,000 or 5,000 people instead of a room of 4 or 5.
Right.
and frequently, in the South, it's often, the latter, right? And so that is really one of the most special things about it. We had some great feedback about the show. We had some great conversations, both with new people that we didn't know, but also reconnected with some old friends that, I think are going to be really important folks to help us here, with the Valley Labor Report, but also with the North Alabama Area Labor Council, with all the projects that we have, here trying to organize in the South and just build worker power. So I feel, like my energy is back a little bit. I feel my spirits have been lifted. It was a little somber compared to previous conferences, but you really cannot beat the training that's offered there. I've been joking with you, Jacob. We could just look through the program and find content and guest ideas for days and days and days, because there were so many good workshops. One I will lift up specifically that I really enjoyed was on the nuts and bolts of a millionaire's tax campaign. Obviously, working for a policy organization in my day job, that was very interesting to me. And it was really powerful to hear how folks in Massachusetts came together, despite some, and we can make some assumptions about Massachusetts being kind of a blue liberal state compared to Alabama or Tennessee or, down here. But they still had a lot of obstacles to overcome. They had a lot of work to do. It took a lot of money. It took a lot of organizing. I mean, the amount of doors they knocked, the amount of inboxes they hit, the amount of phone calls they made, it was really remarkable. But they really built grassroots power, along with institutional support from labor. Specifically, the education labor universe was very instrumental in that victory. But they have been able to raise billions of dollars to fund, essential services that working families rely on, public education, and infrastructure, which is really, really exciting. And so that's something that was on my mind as I think about Alabama. We have a huge election in November. The entire state government is up for election, state house, state senate, governor, you name it. And then we'll have a legislative session, next year, early next year, where we're going to be facing some real budget problems. We're going to be facing some issues related to federal spending cuts. Alabama already has a bare bones budget, but there's money out there, and millionaires and billionaires have some of that money. There's not a lot of billionaires in Alabama, but there are definitely tax loopholes that allow the wealthy to keep getting wealthier, while the rest of us are dealing with just inadequate state services. So that was really cool and helpful, but definitely the highlight is just, reconnecting with folks and connecting with new people. It was great to see some of our fans in person. It's great to know that people, have heard of this project. I had a great conversation with a brother from Australia who is a member of the teachers union there. And we had a great chat about public education, which is near and dear to my heart as a former educator. I didn't realize how bad privatization had gotten in Australia. Many of the same issues we're struggling with here in the South when it comes to private schools, when it comes to underinvestment and kind of funneling people towards private schools. That's a big issue in Australia. And, where else are you going to have those kind of conversations where you just are in a hallway chatting it up with an Australian teachers union leader, and learning how shared your struggles really are and how connected they really are and how you're fighting some of the same bad guys and some of the same strategies. So that was always a highlight. And I really appreciate the chance to be there. Looking forward to attending in the future. Looking forward to supporting whatever opportunities there are for more regional trainings. Like I mentioned earlier in the first half of the show, if you're interested, LaborNotes does work with folks on troublemaker schools, which are more like kind of a day-long version, scaled down, obviously. You could focus on any particular aspects, whether it's like running a Secrets of a Successful Organizer workshop track, which they obviously offer at the big conference, or, something more localized and specific to your region. Great experience as always. It was really special for me to visit the Chicago Teachers Union. Jacob and I had a chance to go down there while we were in town, and that was a full circle moment for me because, the Chicago Teachers Union strike in 2012 is what got me organizing. It's what, lit a fire under me. I had already dabbled in politics a little bit, I guess. Like, I have been reading politics and reading about organizing and, followed progressive media. And I was mad all the time at all the things happening in the world, but I didn't really know what to do about it. And I didn't know who I could connect with. There wasn't really much of a scene in North Alabama to, it's nothing like what you have in Minneapolis or Chicago. So I felt very lonely. But when Chicago Teachers Union went on that strike for the schools their students deserved, it gave me and so many other folks an inspiration that we could do this. We could reform our unions to be fighting democratic organizations, and we could build coalitions with the community, with the parents and students, and grandmothers who we serve in the community as educators. And we could take on one of the most powerful mayors in the world and win. So that was such an inspiration. So to be able to meet some comrades from CTU and get to visit the hall was really a special moment for me. And so that was a full circle moment because I probably wouldn't have gotten involved in activism and organizing had that not happened. And it changed the course of my life. I thought I was going to be a quiet little history teacher and do my 25, 30 years and retire. But instead, here I am, fighting the good fight. So shout out to all of the folks that you get to learn from. I've learned so much through the course of this show, but also through LaborNotes conferences, just getting to meet diverse folks from all over who have that passion for working people. So can't recommend it enough. Definitely check it out. And as Gus put in the chat, LaborNotes does have a podcast, which I recommend as well.
Let's go ahead and play our interview with Lauren McFerrin from the AFL-CIO convention, and then we'll wrap up. We are joined by Lauren McFerrin, the Executive Director of the AFL-CIO Tech Institute. Thank you so much for taking the time.
My pleasure. I appreciate the conversation.
So you were previously chair of the National Labor Relations Board. We won't talk about that, but a very, very respectable tenure. I fangirled a little bit when I met you at the beginning of the convention. We appreciate the work that you did at the NLRB. I think you were great. But you're at the Tech Institute now. Can you talk to us about how did the Tech Institute come to be? Why did the AFL-CIO decide to invest in this issue?
Well, I think to President Schuler's credit, she saw the issue of how artificial intelligence and other emerging technologies were going to impact workers coming a long time ago and created something called the Commission on the Future of Work. And from that commission's work over the course of several years, developed a number of recommendations. And one of those recommendations was to create the Tech Institute. So the Tech Institute was created about 5 years ago. And we largely serve as a center of gravity for the labor movement about issues surrounding emerging technologies. So we are a resource to the labor movement with education, training materials, webinars, etc. We assist with legislative advocacy at the federal, state, and local level. We do lots of work with the collective bargaining process. We do work with trying to center worker voice in the research and development process as well.
And why is this something that you wanted to take on as executive director coming off of your term at the NLRB?
I do not come from a tech background, and I don't pretend to come from a highly tech-oriented background, but I've worked my whole career trying to build and protect worker power. And I do think that the rapid infusion of AI and other advanced technologies into the workplace presents a policy moment where we need to be really thinking very fundamentally about how to rebalance power in the workplace and power in the economy. And so it's the moment that this technology is creating that I think gives us the opportunity to do something really impactful for workers, and that was what attracted me to the role.
And so, thinking about the policy prescriptions and putting up those guardrails and rebalancing power in the workplace and in bargaining over contracts and in places where there are not union contracts, what are some of the principles for AI that the Tech Institute has kind of landed on after an initial period of surveying and researching the landscape?
Well, you used the word principles, and that's a very good word to choose there. The AFL-CIO's Tech Institute, the AFL-CIO, and our 65 affiliated unions went through a more than year-long process to coalesce around a set of principles that are kind of our guiding light in this work. And those principles include very basic things like, well, we start where we always start, which is with organizing and collective bargaining. That the most important tool that workers can have on their side in these conversations is organizing and collective bargaining, to bargain for what we want in the workplace and what we don't want in the workplace. But a lot of people, as you said, don't have those kinds of protections in the workplace, and they need guardrails too. So we talk about issues in the principles like surveillance, electronic monitoring, use of workers' data, use of workers' name, image, and likeness, again, without their consent. Algorithmic management, which is a really big fancy word of saying that an algorithm or a computer is your boss and not a person. So we have this set of 8 core principles that we've laid out that really guide our work, whether it's in federal policy, state policy, local policy, at the collective bargaining table, to make sure that we are advancing the interests of workers no matter what the arena of the conversation might be.
One of the principles is around, as you said, robot management. What does the Tech Institute and the AFL-CIO have to say about that happening?
Algorithmic management can be very dangerous. It can be dangerous in a number of different ways. Algorithmic management can be used to put workers through a pace of work that is too rapid for them to be safe. It can be used to hire and fire workers based on a disciplinary system that's created by the algorithm without any human input. It can be used to surveil them and give them discipline based on the product of that surveillance. It can be used to limit their freedom and their autonomy in really dehumanizing ways, monitoring how long workers are in the bathroom or who they're talking to on the shop floor, in a matter that can actually implicate their rights under the National Labor Relations Act. So I think our position would be that we really need workers to have strong protections against having an algorithm make decisions without a human in the loop, and even beyond a human in the loop, without humans having the ability to impact the decision-making in a meaningful way. It's not just a human rubber stamping what the algorithm has done. We need worker voice throughout the process so that we have an opportunity to have a meaningful oversight of this technology, or in some cases, bans altogether when it is unsafe.
Something that the tech industry is talking about is the potential productivity gains from AI. And Elon Musk has actually said that the productivity gains from AI is going to lead to universal high income. Doesn't say how that's going to happen exactly, even as they're balking at Bernie Sanders' 50% ownership for the government of these AI companies, which seems like the way that you would implement a universal basic income or a high income, but obviously they don't actually want to do that, so I'm not sure why there's... But on the productivity question, what has the Tech Institute found about the potential for AI to actually increase productivity? How much of that is kind of a little bit salesmanship on their part, and how can the Tech Institute and unions and the labor movement be a part of that conversation around increased productivity?
I'll say 3 things about productivity. The first one you've correctly identified, which is that often the productivity gains are proving to be hype once the product is put into the workplace. A good example recently that got a lot of media attention was Starbucks, where they tried to entirely automate their inventory control system. And lo and behold, they discovered the technology really wasn't capable of effectively doing that, and they had to put human workers back doing their inventory management work. So the first is...
Really quickly on that one, I just want to say that is not a good sign for the AI productivity stuff. Because inventory, I mean, when you said it, I was like, okay, maybe that makes it, it's literally just numbers and spreadsheets, and they can't even do that yet. That seems not good for their theory of the case.
I think they're trying to do something a little more complex involving like visual identification of stock on store shelves and things like that. But so the first point is that it can be overstated. The second point on productivity would be that the best way to make sure that these are productivity-enhancing technologies is to put workers at the table when they're being designed. We try to facilitate, when we can and when there's openness to it, partnerships between people developing the products, these technology products, and the workers that are going to be using them. When you actually have, for example, there's a partnership between Microsoft and the American Federation of Teachers. And when you actually put teachers in the room with the people who are designing academic products involving AI to say, this would help us, this wouldn't help us, this is going to make our jobs harder, and the kids are going to totally abuse this product. That kind of voice in the development process makes sure that what comes out of that process is actually making workers work better, safer, more productive, rather than putting a product out that workers haven't been at the table at and doesn't really work for them and doesn't improve productivity. But then you also touched on the third important piece of the productivity conversation, which is sharing the gains that productivity brings. If we are supposed to all be living in this future utopia where technology is going to make all of our productivity increase and there's going to be massive increases of wealth in society, then we need to have institutional mechanisms and policies in place to make sure that workers share in the gains that their productivity, that their data, that their input has helped to create.
And one of the principles around that, if I'm not misremembering, is enhancing workers' ability to organize, to be able to, people listening who aren't in unions might think, oh yeah, of course the union thing is going to say that you need more unions to deal with the technology, but it goes back to that conversation about workers being at the table, being able to be there from the ground level as these technologies are being designed, developed, and implemented, and it's really not just, we're a union, so we think unions are the answer to everything. There's a very clear, it's direct, the theory of the case for why more unions, getting more workers to have more control over their workplace, is going to be of benefit to those workers and to our society as we have this sort of technological revolution.
No, this should be a huge organizing moment for the labor movement, because what the polling research tells us is that workers are deeply anxious about what this technology will mean for their workplace, and that they don't trust many of the major actors. They don't trust Democrats, they don't trust Republicans, they don't trust the tech industry, and they don't trust their employers to be at their side. They do trust the labor movement. And that we're the only one that polls net positive on this. So it's a real opportunity for the labor movement, because we can demonstrably show that when you have a union and you have the ability to go to the table and say, it was my data, it was my work that trained this product, it is my job that is supposed to be more productive, and I'm the one who's being more productive with this product, I deserve a share of the gains that that productivity has brought. And the union is what gives you the tool to demand that and get it.
As we're wrapping up here, I totally lost my train of thought. As we're wrapping up here, what is your call to action for union leaders at the local level and across the country? And then what sort of resources can you provide them from the Tech Institute as they're trying to deal with these sorts of things as they pop up in the workplace?
The first thing I would say is educate yourselves. Technology can be scary, it can be intimidating, but you don't have to understand how the algorithm was designed to understand what it means for your workplace. But you need to know how it's being used in your workplace if you want to effectively stand up for yourself and your rights. So first I would say is absolutely educate yourselves and use your local unions, use your local union leadership as tools to educate the public. And then it is mobilize around these issues. These issues are incredibly important to the American public right now. And candidly, they pull off the charts in terms of their popularity on a bipartisan basis. Republicans, Democrats alike, they all want guardrails on this technology. So it's an opportunity for us to build some bridges, to build some coalitions, to work across party lines, and to really mobilize a movement to demand in public policy, to demand at the bargaining table, to demand in our individual workplaces the protections that workers need in this era.
All right. Lauren McFerrin, thank you so much for your time. Is there anything else that you want to leave us with before we let you go?
No, it's been my pleasure. Thank you for doing this work.
All right. Thank you so much.
That's it for our show this week, folks. Appreciate you tuning in. Donate at tvlr.fm/donate. Subscribe to the newsletters at tvlr.fm. And send us a note at tvlr.fm/contact. We'll see you next week.